Welcome back to the party, everybody. This is Morty, and I am your host, Lutch, aka the Indian Jesus, here to resurrect the second coming of common sense. How's everybody doing tonight? Hit that like and subscribe, and let's party. Want to give a quick shout out to the replay gang. Thank you so much for coming back to check this out, even though you missed the live party. Guys, that is the best part, so make sure you are here every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern, and sometimes whenever I feel like. I went live for like an hour yesterday, so just hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and you will never miss an Indian Jesus live party ever again. Let's also say thank you to my6shirt.com. Whatever your persuasion, they've got something for you. And of course, it is the only place to get your very own The Indian Jesus official merch. Only at my6shirt.com. All right. What is good? We got Zippy in the building. We got Opus in the building. What is good? Welcome to the party. So you saw the thumbnail. You see the title. We are talking about Robert Kennedy Jr. tonight. So, all I know about him basically is he's a Kennedy. And he's got a raspy voice. And people on the right don't seem to hate him. That's about the extent of my knowledge of RFK Jr. So he was actually on the Part of the Problem podcast that we've talked about before. That's Dave Smith's podcast. The Libertarian dude who is always just got great takes, and I just love it. So let's dive right in. As always, if you cannot hear the video, please do let me know.
You're listening to Part of the Problem on the Gas Digital Network. Here's your host, Dave Smith.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. Very special episode today. I'm very excited about this show. We have joining us a guest who I'm thrilled to have on the show. He is a current candidate for President of the United States on the Democratic Party. He is one of the most interesting political figures in America today, at least in my humble opinion. Mr. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., thank you so much for taking some time. I've known of you for a long time, but I became really interested in you during the COVID response insanity. It was really nice to see people of prominence who hadn't lost their mind.
That's interesting because Dave Smith was like my go-to guy when it came to, Rona stuff. And I don't remember him talking about RFK Jr. once, but maybe I just wasn't listening.
During that time. And of course, I've been very interested in your presidential campaign. Where should I start here? Did you, was it just in your blood that you were destined to run for president? Did you think you were going to run for president at some point?
I never thought I was going to run for president.
Yes, that is his voice. If you are not familiar with RFK, that is his voice. And I'm very curious as to whether that raspiness is going to hurt him. Because it's just not as easy to listen to as somebody who has a little bit more of a silky smooth voice like myself.
What happened during COVID was just, it seemed like not only the country, but the party, my party, had completely gone off the rails and was departing from all of the principles and beliefs that liberal Democrats parties always stood for. We became the party of war. When Democrats were always skeptical of war, we became the party of fear. And FDR said the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And the reason that he said that in 1932. During his first inaugural, during his first presidency. And he said that because the Depression had scared everybody. And
obviously,
there were people in our country who were, taking their money out of the banks and putting it in their mattresses. The unemployment was at historical highs. Banks were closing, businesses were closing. The same thing was happening in Europe. And Roosevelt saw what was happening in Italy and Spain and Germany, where right-wing totalitarian elements were promoting and using fear in order to erase democratic rights and constitutional rights. Germany was the most democratic nation in Europe, and to erect these totalitarian infrastructures. in Eastern Europe and Russia and the Soviet Union, the same thing was happening. You had Stalin and others using fear to create left-wing totalitarianism. And what Roosevelt, in our country, a third of the people had lost faith in democracy and wanted to mimic what was happening in Western Europe with the fascist regime. And another third had lost faith in democracy and wanted to be communist. And so he was saying to the American people, the thing we need to fear is fear. Because fear is a tool of totalitarian elements.
And we see that today. We see that like not even just today and then all throughout. That has always been a tool of control is fear. Fear mongering. When people are afraid, they will do things that they might otherwise not ever do.
Whether they're left wing or right wing. And if we stay the course and stay calm, that this ship is going to right itself. And so that was a warning, that I grew up thinking that America was the home of the free and the land of the brave.
Yep.
And the reason that we were the home of the free is because we were the land of the brave.
Based.
And all of a sudden you had the Democratic Party that was just, pumping up fear and stoking it and inflaming it and telling us we all had to obey and we all had to abandon our constitutional rights. Yeah. And they dismantled in front of my eyes. They dismantled the Constitution. They went after first freedom of speech, which Madison, Hamilton, Adams said we put that in the free expression of the First Amendment because all the other amendments are dependent on it.
There's a reason the First Amendment is first because it is the most important one. Everything being behind that is there to what's the word I'm looking for? To maintain that right. The freedom to express yourself. It is that fundamental to a free society.
The government can silence its critics. It has a license for any atrocity. And as soon as they realize, okay, they're putting up with it, they're actually going to put up with this. They went after the other plank in the First Amendment was freedom of worship. They closed all the churches for a year without any scientific citation, no.
And again, even as a huge atheist, could not be more of an atheist. I think that's wrong. I think people should be allowed to express themselves. And if religion is how they express themselves, you should be able to do that. Crazy, right?
Democratic process, no notice and comment rulemaking, all the things that I've been suing government corporation for years of enacting rules without notice and comment rulemaking. Suddenly they had one unelected bureaucrat who was telling everybody to stay in your homes. They closed 3.3 million businesses with no due process, no just compensation. They banned jury trials for pharmaceutical companies who injured, their customers. And they made an all-out assault on the Fourth Amendment prohibitions against warrantless searches and seizures with all this surveillance and intrusion and questions about we have to produce our medical records before we leave our home and go into a building or fly on an airplane or whatever. So I saw this happening and the Democratic Party, everybody just going along with it. And and that was when I started, because I was the target of a lot of this censorship. The White House, we now know from the Twitter files and from the Facebook email releases, the White House was directly
right in their pockets. A direct line to say, hey, we don't like that. So take that down, please.
Collaborating with Mark Zuckerberg and with Twitter. And they had given a portal with the CIA and the FBI.
Hey, we got Lars Rune in the building. Welcome to the party. Said, I like him, but the Democratic Party are already shutting him down. CNN just calls him an anti-vaxxer. A Russian puppet will probably be next. He should have run independent. That's, we were, I think Zippy was mentioning something about that earlier. If he, went through, independent or a different party. And I just think that the uniparty is too strong right now. There's a reason that Trump ran as a Republican and not an independent or a Democrat as he was for his whole life, because the establishment is too established. And you know, we were talking in the chat before we began about, you know, whether you know, being blackpilled about whether you know, whether things can change. But the fact is, you know, government was meant to move slowly, and as long as we are moving the you know, moving the ball, then we will eventually hit the end zone. But the thing is that we have to constantly be moving in the right direction. So as long as, like, that's nothing new. Somebody that we like in politics, quote unquote, like in politics, being smeared, that's nothing new. We can deal with that. But we just have to be aware that that's what's going on and be consistent in pushing back. Welcome to the party,
American
Lord and
citizens,
Rune.
including me. And so at that point, I said, well, the only way that I'm going to be allowed to speak is if I run. But my wife would never let me run if she didn't. She would not allow me to run just to make a point,
Right.
you know, make an argument. So, but then we started seeing these polls. There was a famous pollster called Jeremy Zogby that started polling me without me knowing it, and he brought me the polls, and that showed, you know, that I could win. And I showed those to Cheryl, and she said, "Okay, I'm on board."
Wow. Okay, that's it. See, my wife would have the opposite attitude. She'd go, if there's a chance you could win, you can't do it. But if you're definitely not going to win, then go for it. Make your point. But that is
what we need. Well, I know that he was joking, but that is what we need. Somebody who is going to go in. And for a while, it seemed like that's what Trump was doing, because it didn't seem like he had any chance to win in 2016. But we need somebody who is going to spend the money, take the time, do all of this stuff to just make a point, because that point needs to be made. Whether it's there's too much money in campaign finance and stuff, there's too much money in politics in general. Whether it's the fact that the two parties are the same, whatever the point is, somebody needs to go and take that for the team.
no. Listen, if you were trying to just make a point and not win, and you're looking at some of these polls, I think I'd be a little concerned, because you are there. It is very interesting to see the way the corporate press is trying to deal with you. Now, I talk about on this show constantly the dishonesty of the corporate press and the propaganda and the misinformation. They accuse us of spreading misinformation, but the real misinformation that comes out, I mean, just in the last 20 years, misinformation with catastrophic consequences, like claiming that Saddam Hussein was working with Osama bin Laden to plan a new attack with weapons of mass destruction. You know, and
that was an $8 trillion lie.
Yeah, and a million human being lie.
A million Iraqis and 3,500 Americans. More people than died in the World Trade Center.
And by the way, that's not counting the soldiers who came home and blew their brains out from the trauma.
30,000.
So then another So make it more like
23 a day.
Yeah, it's horrific. And so that's like the misinformation they put. And then of course through the COVID and all of the vaccine. If you get the vaccine, you can't get the virus, you can't spread the virus, and none of those guys ever get labeled as someone who spread COVID misinformation. Nope. But I gotta say, even as somebody who focuses like very intently on the propaganda spread by the corporate press, I was really blown away by ABC's handling of your interview, where they actually, these people who all day long are shouting about the threats to democracy,
did anybody see that interview? I'm not familiar.
Decided you, the viewer, cannot hear what this presidential candidate, who in the latest Rasmussen poll is tied with the sitting president, what this candidate has to say to you cannot hear, but we will inform you that it's wrong. And there was something about that really, like, I was like, I can't believe they're actually going for this. And I think obviously it's because they know that you're making a really good point about this stuff, and they don't want their viewers to hear it, because
exactly democracy, and they know that, like he said, they know that people are warming up to this guy. The fact that all of us here are like, oh, I don't really know what's good with him, but I've been hearing good things. That's already bad for them. So that's why we're like Lars in the room was saying, that they're already trying to shut him down, because they can see that he is the problem. Yeah, me neither. So let's see if they'll get a little bit more into it. Don't forget to like the
Because they're
video,
worried they might
please,
be persuaded by what you have
guys.
to say.
Yeah, but it is weird that they think, that they think that their job now. It used to be that the press considered itself the guardian of the First Amendment, and that any intrusions or impingements on free speech, they all had to get up and shut them down. And now they're purveyors of censorship. And on that, what they did on ABC was particularly egregious because they just were doing it right in front of us. She asked me that, the host asked me a question, said it was a setup question. I didn't go on there to talk about vaccines. I'm not leading with vaccines. I don't talk about vaccines in my speeches unless, the group wants me to. And it's not, the reason that I'm running. But if somebody asks me about them, I'm going to tell the truth. And I know a lot about it. And so she said to me, something to the extent, it was like not just a question, but it was a speech in a question. It was everything you've said about vaccines and autism has been debunked. How do you explain yourself?
Has it though? Now, I'm not one to be an anti-vaxxer in general. It was specifically the recent one. And I don't know necessarily, well, let's just say in getting my psychology degree, I was taught explicitly that there was no connection between vaccines and autism. I just don't know if I can trust that information anymore. I haven't done any more research. So, I've gotten, most people that I know have had to get, the same vaccines that we all had to go to school and stuff. So it doesn't seem like there is a correlation, but who knows anymore? Who knows?
So I let loose and I know a lot about it. And I was citing studies and, the names of studies. And so when she aired it, she got to do her little question was on, and then everything I said was removed. And at the end, and they started out that she bracketed the segment with a little speech about pharma at the beginning and saying I was, condemning me as a spreader, promoter of misinformation.
Of course.
And then she did the same thing at the end. And she said we had to censor him because he was saying something that wasn't true. And
so why can't you just if it's so wrong and it's so bad and it's so inaccurate, why can't you let him say it and then you on air debunk it? How hard would that be? Probably pretty hard because it's not misinformation.
We know you appreciate that as our audience. It's very, very strange and disturbing.
Yeah, and then a couple weeks later, Donald Trump has this town hall on CNN where I guess they did let him speak, but they're getting a lot of pushback from people who are saying, oh, you shouldn't have given him a platform. We shouldn't have let him speak. I mean, how...
He's running for the president of the United States of America. No matter what he says, wouldn't you prefer to know what's in his head before he potentially gets elected to leader of the free world?
However you feel about Donald Trump, this just seems to me to be a crazy position that the former president of the United States of America ought be silenced so that the current front runner in the Republican field, that the Americans, it's very bizarre to me how every single day these people talk about the threats to democracy, and yet they seem to be the first ones who embrace
anything that will destroy democracy.
Censorship of political figures who are not like fringe, this guy's at 1% political figures, but guys who are polling very well. Who are if they can't speak, then what is democracy? You get to vote, but you can't hear what people are running on and make your own decisions. This is something out of like a cartoon world.
Yeah, that doesn't sound very appealing to me. We already question whether or not our vote counts in the way that we think it does. And then you're telling me that I can't even listen to the people for whom I might be actually voting. And you think that's going to do better? Of course not. Of course not. It's just another way for you to maintain power.
Yeah. And, the Democrats don't like, and the mainstream media is not really talking about the Durham report. But
Yeah.
for me, because I've been concerned for so many years about, about the CIA's illegal propagandizing American people, which it's not legally allowed to do.
Nope.
That report is appalling. And it's not just the report and the guy who did it, which you can say, okay, he had some motive or whatever, but it's the transcripts of the conversations that the CIA and FBI agents were having, where they were acknowledging that what they were doing was wrong, that it had no basis. And so you have the CIA.
And people just, I don't want to say people didn't care about the Durham report, but it was kind of just like yep, we thought so. And there's not really much else to say about it, because everybody's like, yeah, of course, this has been BS since 2020. I mean, who even knows? We've accepted that this was BS for so long. It's nice to have that validation of it actually in black and white, but it's not news.
Coming in 50 top-level CIA agents who agree to collaborate in a project to fix an election and to discredit one of the candidates. And I don't like Donald Trump. I don't think he was a good president. But people are allowed to disagree with that, and I can be friends with people who don't agree with me.
Now that I think about it, there's a lot of people who, are not, on either side of the extreme. There's also very few politicians, specifically politicians, that you hear that will openly talk about working with people on the other side of the aisle if it's not in the context of, look how great I am for working with people on the other side of the aisle. And here he is just like, yeah, we can be friends. I don't like the dude, but if you do, whatever. Obviously, we're in direct competition, but it doesn't need to end friendships. It doesn't need to end relationships.
And I can listen to their point of view, and we need to apply rules across the board.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
we
I completely agree.
We can't just say it's okay to shut up Donald Trump. It's okay for CIA agents to fix an election against him.
Yeah. Exactly. It's unbelievable how many people have this binary thinking, because I'll say something about this, like how horrible this whole Russian investigation was, and people would be like, oh, so you love Donald Trump? And I'm like, no, I think Donald Trump was a horrible president on many fronts. I think I will never forgive Donald Trump for funding the Saudi war in Yemen. I will never forgive Donald Trump for blowing up budgets in the reckless way that he did, and I will never forgive him for keeping Fauci as the head of the task force.
That is the biggest one for me. Now, I was just watching the members only segment from Timcast when Don Jr. was on, and they were talking about, what could he have done, and firing the people around him, and specifically Fauci. They were talking about how, we didn't, in hindsight, it's very easy to see how badly he handled the whole thing, even after Trump. But at the time, firing Fauci was probably not as much of a practical response as we would have thought, because how easily would that have been spun into, we have all this, all this infrastructure in case something happens. Now we have this virus. And what does Trump do? Gets rid of the only person we trust. And I could see that being a very, very easy narrative to push.
Through all of 2020.
Or how about locking down the whole country?
Yeah, and supporting it, at least, as the governors were doing it. However, I can also look at the information here and go, look, it's pretty clear that this was a frame job. And what you have here is the intelligence agencies framing the sitting president of the United States for treason. This is a very serious offense. Now, I'm sure you've never heard of the CIA working against a sitting president before. Nothing in your family history that could possibly maybe.
He's a Kennedy. So FBI and his family history. What could he be talking about? Oh,
bring that up. But that obviously, this also is not the first time.
Now they're doing it right in front of us.
Yes, that's right. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show.
Let's not. Oh God.
Bob, your mayor, Bert Barone, back into whatever you want. So let me ask you, because look, it's a little bit
take
strange.
These off, or
yeah, if you want to, whatever you want to do, sure. It's almost a little look to me.
Take my tie off, too?
To whatever you want, take it all off, sir.
Take it off. Take it enough. I genuinely, actually, let's go to the poll here. We only got 4 of you, but most people are not saying never, never have, never will. Half said never have, but could be convinced. So that's very interesting. So I want to put up a new poll, and let's just say, do you think voice will hurt him in the race? It's rough. It's rough. It's rough.
To me, there is a this is like, I'm talking about American history, and I tried to segue in with a bad joke, but I know when I'm talking to you about this, I'm talking about like your father and your uncle, so it's a little bit more personal. But I know you've talked about this before. But isn't this kind of, in some way, doesn't it kind of remind you of like what happened with your uncle, what seems to have happened with Donald Trump? Not saying whether you agree with the policies either way, but it does seem like you ask the question, like, what's really going on here in this government?
And the answer is something. It's definitely not nothing. We have no idea. We have no idea what goes on in the shadows, but we know it's not nothing.
We have these unelected, secretive 3-letter organizations that are working against the duly elected president of the United States. You know, if for all the people freaking out about democracy, it seems to me like that would be a real threat to democracy.
Yeah, I mean,
you'd think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so, you know, I use the word appalling. But you know, and January 6th was a really, you know, was a horrible day for our country, and the people who broke the law should go to jail. But is it more threatening to our country if you have a bunch of, you know, sort of yahoos storming the Capitol because, you know, okay, they make great havoc for a day, but the whole, you know, United States military is sitting there to protect our government, and
supposedly
they're not going to bring down American democracy. Even when you have a president who, you know, would like to fix the vote or whatever, there's a lot of checks and balances. But what happens when the CIA is interfering with elections? There's no checks and balances. That is a real threat to American democracy. What happens when the CIA is involved in censoring people like me who are critical of government policies? And by the way, if I was promoting misinformation, the Constitution protects that. Oh, you know, the remedy for misinformation is not censorship, it's more information. But having said that, I was not promoting misinformation. Right. If I was promoting misinformation, show me a statement I made that was factually incorrect.
Well, exactly. That's exactly what I said. So I'm hoping, you know, we're getting, you know, a ways into this, and I'm hoping Dave is kind of just easing him in, because I expect a hard-hitting interview here. So if that's not what we get, I'm going to be a little disappointed. And maybe we'll have to check out some other stuff.
That's why it's so
and guess
crazy.
What? I'll correct it.
Right. Well, that's why the ABC reaction was so crazy, because look, if you're a journalist and you claim someone is promoting misinformation, well, then your job is to know 10 times more than they know about the subject and demonstrate to your viewer how they're wrong about this, and then let your viewer decide, like, oh yeah, it did seem like that journalist actually knew a lot more about the vaccine than RFK Jr. did, and therefore she was able to expose him. However, they know that you know 10 times more than them, and that they can't do that, so they just silence you. But I just want to...
Yeah, and I wouldn't object even if they asked me the question and let me answer, and then have their whole army of researchers go out and look at everything I said and parse it, and then put up, you know, a defense saying he was wrong here, was wrong there. They can do that. But to just say we're going to censor him is really shows contempt for the law, because the law makes it illegal to censor on the publicly owned airwaves. ABC does not own the airwaves. ABC has a license to use them, and it must use them for the public benefit.
So this is,
and you know, part of the public benefit. There's a provision in the Code of Federal.
Sorry, I forgot what I was going to say. Let's run that back. What was he going to say?
He has a license to use them, and it must use them for the public benefit.
Right. So this is a similar type of thing of, Section 230 and how Twitter and Facebook and stuff like that, how they are, how they operate and how they're supposed to be able to, have protections as a platform. But unfortunately, they want their cake and eat it too. So they want the protections of being a platform where if somebody says some crazy ish, they're like, oh, that's not me. That's not me. But they want the privileges of having being a publisher where they can just take out whatever they want. Obu says, for me, his voice at first was like, what the heck is this? But then I started thinking that it gives him character. Oh, interesting. Yeah, he's you're definitely not going to forget that one. Definitely not going to forget that one. Makes him relatable. I mean, I've certainly never heard anybody who sounds like him, but you're right. It's very distinctive. And any way to stand out, right? Any way to stand out. Good point.
And, part of the public benefit, there's a provision in the Code of Federal Regulations, 45 CFR, I think it's 413, that says you can't censor a presidential candidate. So they were showing contempt for the law, but they were really showing contempt for their function, which is not to manipulate information, but to tell the truth unvarnished to the American people and let us make up our mind. Instead, they were manipulating the public. They were saying, you are not mature enough to hear things and we're going to decide what you can and cannot hear. And we're only going to allow you to hear things that promote the reigning orthodoxies.
Right.
Yeah, of course. They want to set the narrative. I want to give a shout out to those of you on Facebook. Thank you for joining the party. If you would like to come over and hang out with us on YouTube, I've just dropped the link, but welcome.
Well, I think one of the things that you are
Oba says apparently it's a neurological disorder. Interesting. So was he born with it, or is it something that developed over time? I'm imagining like a 6-year-old kid like, oh, I bought some cupcakes.
Ironically, I think you're benefiting from this treatment that the media is giving you.
Do you think so?
I do. And I think that's part of the reason why I think your poll numbers have gone up since some of this treatment from the media. Because I do think that for the majority of people, look, even in that ABC interview, one of the things that I thought was kind of amusing was they started with trying to like throw at you that some of your family disagrees with the positions you've been taking. What? And they're like, well, this family member of yours doesn't agree with you. And this family member said this. And I'm sitting there listening to it. And the only thing I feel when I hear that is I go,
I'm not surprised, motherfuckers.
Of course, that's how they're going to go at it.
Oh, well, that's kind of courageous. That this guy will take a position that is even going to get him some heat from within people very close in his life, but he really believes it, so he's going to take this position. And they don't even see it from that angle, and
they don't even see that is something to be valued. They don't even see that, hey, I believe in this thing, and even if it's going to make me, or even if it's not going to make me popular, even if it's going to make me unpopular, this is right. This is just. This is what is good for the American people, and so I'm going to stand on it. Not only do they not see it that way, but they don't understand that just in general, that's a good thing. That's a good characteristic for people in general, whether or not we're talking about the president.
I think for a lot of people, I think this is one of the things that Donald Trump benefited from a lot in 2016 and then throughout his presidency is that whether you like him or not, I used to say this all the time. I'd be like, I can't stand Donald Trump, but the media makes me want to root for him.
Yep. As we always talk about, it became a meme. Stop making me defend Trump. I was a never Trumper to begin with. And just by the people, going so hard on the things that didn't make sense. I remember specifically making Facebook posts at the time when people, still followed me on my personal page and actually listened to what I said. Well, not really, but they didn't block me yet. I remember specifically saying, like, look, Trump is terrible, horrible, no good, very bad, all of this stuff. Stop making stuff up about him. Stop obfuscating what really happened. It's bad enough that if you just talk about what really happened, that'll be good enough. And I do think that if the polarization wasn't as bad, then it wouldn't have riled the MAGA crowd up so much, being called a basket of deplorables, all that kind of stuff. That is how politics works. It's based on feelings. We got a new sound. What about it's based on feelings? Yeah, I got the new super large stream deck. So let me know how I'm doing with the sound effects. Are they too loud? Are they too they don't fit? Let me know.
Because they're so unfair to them that it just makes you want to root for them. And I like you much better, and the media is making me want to root for you. And
There you
especially
go.
because I also happen to think you're right about these issues that you're talking about.
The other thing about that, my family, first of all, I mean, and what I said to her is, I said, does your family like support everything you say? Because
Mine doesn't.
My family, like coming home to the dinner table, and my parents encouraged us when we were kids. They're, 11 kids. And they encourage us to argue with each other and to stand up for ourselves. And, our dinner table was like hand-to-hand combat.
And that's what you need. You need to be able to develop the skills to, one, understand your own thoughts, and two, be able to relay them to other people. Lars Maroon said, I think we want honesty, and RFK Jr. comes across to me as very honest. I agree. Oba says, I was never Trump. I was a never Trumper 2016, then voted for him in 2020 on his policy record alone. That and the mainstream media hating him so much made me like him. Yeah, so many people. I like that. The only reason I was super hesitant to vote in 2020, as many of you will already know, is because I did the worst thing that anybody could ever do in politics, and I cast a vote for Hillary Rodham Clinton. And so I just decided, look, I am never going to vote against anyone ever again, ever. If you are going to get my vote, you are going to earn it. And, at that time, I wasn't, super rah-rah about Trump. So I was just like, hey, I'm going to stay out. This time around could definitely be a very different thing. Hey, we got Iridium Kush in the building. Welcome to the party, brother. It has been a minute since I've seen you. Good to see you. Welcome to the party. Oh, man. Is this your first time hearing it? I'm sorry. Yes, but hey, we all make mistakes. And as long as you learn from them and nobody dies, you'll be all right.
But we still love each other.
Right.
We know we can disagree on issues. And if you read anything about my grandfather, Joseph Kennedy, that's what he did with his kids. He would take a position and then make them argue against it. So, there's many things that I've differed over the history with my family. There are people in my family who like legalized marijuana. There are people who don't. There's people in my family now who like the war in Ukraine. And, I and other members don't. So, but it doesn't make us hate each other. And
okay, so that's one thing. He's not for the war in Ukraine. That's definitely a huge plus.
that's something we need to learn to do as a country.
Yeah.
But
Lars gives me a where is it? I'm moving my thing around.
How dare you?
Yeah, I did. And that's the thing is that I wasn't, I wasn't really into politics until after college. And so coming out of college, I was still in my drug addict phase. So that was really all that I focused on. So I just didn't know what was going on in the world around. So then when I came out of that, I was, I want to pay attention and figure out what's going on in the world. So I thought I'm going to be super smart. And I'm not just going to watch MSNBC, but I'm going to watch CNN and Fox News too. I'm going to get really informed. And obviously, you could see how, somebody who's uninitiated is watching that stuff and very easily becomes a never Trumper. And and there's a lot of people who are still stuck in that. People who came into the game way, way before I did and still don't realize that the mainstream media is like looking at the world through a keyhole. I mean, it Oprah says your effects could be a little louder. Like the haram and how dare you. They're really quiet. Okay, cool. Thank you. Let's turn that up. Appreciate it.
The reference to that is so ubiquitous in every article about me. His own family disagrees with him. But, show me. Let's talk about the issues.
Hurrah!
Let's talk
There
about
you
why
go.
I'm wrong on the issues.
There we go.
I think that would be more productive.
See, yeah, we'll run that back for a second. But Oba says I was even more of a never Hillary than a never Trump. See, I didn't have the knowledge to understand who Hillary really was. All I understood that was, okay, well, Bill was the president, so he couldn't be that bad. It couldn't be that bad. And then, I see all the bombastic nature of Trump, and I'm just like, oh my goodness. And then they're telling me if this guy becomes president, the world is gonna end. And obviously, I believe them. And then it didn't happen. Iridium Kush says the mainstream media should not be your only source, as it is government subsidized. Correct, sir. And it took me a while to learn that, but I will pat myself on the back because it was only a couple years that I was like, wait a minute. You said some ish that definitely didn't come true. You said some stuff that really could, you never could have believed that. And luckily, I was like, okay, let me do some deeper digging and find out what is really happening. And that's how we got here.
One of the things that happened during the pandemic that was really
run that back. Give me 1 second. I just turn my fan on. I'm sweating my bones off. I got. All right, and we're back. Sorry about that. Yeah, Russiagate, right? The worst thing that ever happened to America. And that definitely did. Opus is asking about the Discord server where the party never ends. You can always party with me in the Discord server, and then after every single stream, we go in there for a panel discussion. Opus says, do we have a channel in the Discord to share alternative news sources we like? Well, yeah, I mean, you can just put that in the you mean the sources themselves or the actual articles? Because either way, there's the current events channel, and then just in the general channel, we're pretty, small enough here that if you have something specific that, you could just throw it in the general chat and we'll have a discussion about it. Stephen Gardner is a good one here on YouTube. Word up. I'll definitely check him out. Oba says he interviews a lot of former military intelligence about Ukraine. Oh, that's pretty cool. I gotta check that out. All right, let's see what he was saying here.
But show me. Let's talk about the issues. Let's talk about why I'm wrong on the issues. And I think that would be more productive. One of the things that happened during the pandemic that was really kind of disturbing to me was that appeals to authority, which is a logical fallacy, displaced actual evidence-based arguments, so that you could say, you're wrong about this issue because CDC says, you're wrong. CDC says something different. WHO says something different. And we have to trust the experts.
The science.
Trusting the experts is not a function of science, and it's not a function of democracy. It's a function of
totalitarianism. He got it out. He got it out before I did. You guys know what I'm going to say. Function of democracy. It's not a function of democracy. It's a function of dogma, aka religion
and totalitarian regimes.
Yeah.
Science is dynamic. It changes constantly. I've brought over 500 lawsuits, and every lawsuit that I bring, almost all of them involve scientific controversy, and there's always experts on both sides. So when we sued Monsanto, there were experts. Monsanto brought in experts from Stanford, from Yale, and Harvard. And we had experts from Stanford, Yale, and Harvard.
Yeah,
and they were looking at the same evidence and saying completely different things.
Yeah, trust the experts, except the guy who pioneered the vaccines.
What?
That was, well said. Well said. Check the words right out of my mouth.
And so trusting the experts.
Hey, we got Indyfield in the building. Welcome to the party with the $2.99 super chat. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Of course, you know that means that every single super chat comes with a treat for Morty. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and welcome to the party that also makes you the sponsor of the stream. Let me get that banner for you. How you doing, buddy? Glad to see you.
This is not something that, we do and is not something that's done in science. If we trusted the experts, we'd still believe that, the sun revolved around the earth.
Right.
It was one dissident, Galileo and also Copernicus, who said, no, the sun is stationary and we're revolving around it.
And they killed him for that. In case you forgot, they killed him for the truth.
And that was heresy.
The indie film sponsor of the stream.
The experts at that time disagreed with him. And, the experts disagreed about many things in the modern era, about smoking cigarettes. Doctors recommended it for many years. X-rays, X-raying pregnant women,
right,
which was, causing all these cancers, and every doctor was supporting it. Thalidomide, Vioxx, opioids. The entire regulatory superstructure was saying opioids are not, oxycodone is not addictive.
I can tell you from excruciatingly personal experience that is completely wrong, and it is very, 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 very addictive. Very, 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 very addictive. Ova says, I follow a lot of science that is too dry for most people. Interesting string theory that was so popular for the past 30 years is looking to be bunk. Interesting. I've always understood that, it was not quite a fully formed theory. But I'm very interested in that kind of stuff. So again, drop some stuff in the Discord and, maybe we could do a whole show on that.
Yeah.
All the doctors, people say, oh, I have to trust my doctor. All the doctors were saying that.
I have friends of mine, and most people around my age, I'm 40, a lot of people around my age know this. I have friends of mine who became drug addicts because in the 90s, they were just prescribing opioids like crazy.
That story is time and time again. There's just so many people who got prescribed, something for like a back injury or something, and just got stuck because it is that addictive. And then, the doctors won't refill the prescription after a while. And what do? You're not in a sober state of mind. You're hurting. You're sick. And the only thing that will make it feel better is some type of opiate or opioid. And if you're not going to be able to get it legally, well, where do you think you're going to get it? Iridium said doctors prescribe that stuff like candy. Well, they used to, not so much anymore, but certainly they used to. Zippy says when you're a monopoly, you set the rules. Big Pharma was buying doctors. No one cares. Dirty common folk. Doc shop. It's the dirty common folk. Doc shop like it's the. I don't know what you mean by that, but definitely, if you are a monopoly, you do indeed set the rules.
It was just like whatever. Some kid, broke his leg or something like that. They just give him tons of opioids, and I know one kid who's dead now and went into heroin after that. It's horrible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's exactly what I was talking about. I'm the only one of my friends who was in our drug group, and it was a pretty decent sized group. The only one that didn't graduate to heroin. The only one. And I think that's because I did actually respect the monster I was dealing with. I've told this story a couple times before, but the first time I was getting into this stuff, I remembered the Saw movie, with Jigsaw and all that stuff. And if you don't remember, you never seen it, there's the two guys, one's a doctor, and they're shackled in a room. And, the whole movie is, trying to figure out what's going on. And they figure out that this Jigsaw guy has set this up. And one of the doctor guy is like, saying, oh, this is going on. And this is well established. And this is going. And the other guy's like, oh, it seems like you like this dude. And the doctor says something that stuck with me and probably saved my life. He said, as a doctor, when you're trying to fight an illness, the only way you can the only way to defeat it is to understand what it can do, the power of what it can do. And so I kept that in mind I kept that in mind when I was doing these drugs because, other people were doing them around me first. And, they were just treating it like whatever. And so even though I definitely got, into abuse, unquestionably, I started off trying to be like, all right, so I'll do like 3 days on, and then I'll let my body kind of cleanse a little bit. And I kept that up. And again, the only one who didn't graduate to heroin, and I got to think it is that. Zippy says, government created the modern black market. Facts. Oba says, I never graduated to heroin, but I was doing the strongest pills at the time. Oh, Pana.
Shut up!
Yeah. Oh, wrong one. Well, whatever. Say, 5 years clean. Good for you. Good for you. Yeah, I never got to the Opanas. I was using the Roxys, the 30 milligram Roxaset, or the 10 milligram. But the Roxaset, oh, that was amazing. Until it wasn't. But congratulations on your sobriety, brother. Not easy.
Many. I mean, I have known many people who died too, including family members.
Another one.
But 100,000 kids die a year now from that mistake.
100,000?
That FDA made by collaborating secretly with the opioid industry, with the Sacklers, making secret deals, overruling people within the agency who are saying, wait a minute, this is not right.
How dare
And then going ahead and putting that recommendation on the bottles.
With no care for how that is actually going to affect us, the people who are taking them. No care at all. Zippy says, I don't trust drugs. I try and formulize by middle ground mentality and all the information I can find. I don't know what formulize means. So I try and work with the doc to see if the EMD is right for me. I don't know what an EMD is either. CIA control. Well, there you go. That one's true.
And on their manufacturer's inserts, where they could say it's not addictive, and the doctors were reading that, saying, "Oh, FDA says it's not addictive." The same thing they did with the vaccines, and so you can't really trust the experts, especially when it's the regulatory agencies that are, who are a captive agency. They're basically a wholly owned subsidiary of the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah, and somehow it's like a 1-2 punch, because all the people who are saying trust the experts, or the regimes that insist you trust the experts, also come down the hardest on any expert who deviates from what the experts are supposed to be saying. Right. So it's
exactly what you guys were saying about Dr. Malone. Like, he's the expert. He's the expert of all the experts. But we're not gonna deal with that. All right, let's go back to the poll here. So an 8 votes, only 2 people said that his voice is going to hurt his chances. Opus, I think you're on to something there, that it gives him something different. And especially when you're going to be in the race, looking at both sides with Trump, then some type of individualistic, unique characteristic is definitely going to be huge. Because if you lean, the politicians of old would be afraid of Trump coming after him for his voice, whereas this guy can lean in and say, "Oh, I sound like whatever," but you can't da 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 da. So he can use it to his advantage. Interesting.
It's like trust the experts, but this one must be ruined. Like he can't, not that expert, not the Great Barrington Declaration. Like those aren't experts all of a sudden. So it's this interesting thing. When you gave, I listened to your announcement speech that you gave a few weeks back, which was a really great speech. It was over an hour long, and the central theme of it really was on what you were just saying, that essentially there is this unholy alliance between big business and big government that is screwing over average Americans. And I really love that, because I don't know that there's been a presidential campaign since, I would say, Ron Paul's campaigns got at that. I don't really think there's been a presidential campaign since where that has been the central issue of what they're saying. That it's like, look, this is obviously all of it Like all the major crises that are facing this country are a rigged game on behalf of the powerful. And you can get here from like a liberal Democrat point of view or from a libertarian point of view. Either way, we could have but look, if you're talking about the warfare machine, you're talking about, look, however you feel about the war in Ukraine. Like I'm completely opposed to American intervention and support for it.
I said shit. Me too.
But even if you support it, you can recognize that there are weapons companies that are raking in tens of billions of dollars off this.
It's a money laundering scheme for, we give 113 billion to the Ukraine, but 90% of that comes right back to the, to the military industrial, the big contractors, General Dynamics, et cetera, Lockheed, who are making the weapons that are being sold over there. And by the way, then you look at all the generals who are appearing on CNN and saying, oh, we need to be over there. And they're retired generals. And you look at where they're working. Well, they're working for those contractors. So you have this whole thing that's rigged to keep us in this to provide a constant pipeline of new wars in order to feed the military industrial complex. And, this.
Hey, we got Splits in the building. What is good? What is good? Welcome to the party, brother. Glad to see you. We are checking out who is RFK Jr., courtesy of Part of the Problem podcast. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
CIA is a captive agency. And my uncle recognized that. My uncle, when he came into office 2 months in, and he sat down with Alan Dulles, Richard Bissell from the CIA, and Charles Cabell, and they lied to him to his face about Cuba. They said, he said, how are these 1,200 guys going to, conquer an army, Castro's army of 200,000 men, really well trained, and the best intelligence service in the Western Hemisphere? How is this going to happen? They said there's so much discontent against Castro that the people, as soon as they land, they don't need military support. As soon as they land, the people are going to rise up and support them. And they sent them to a place where there was no place they could hide, And my uncle realized when those men were dying on the beach, he realized that the CIA had lied to him, and he came out of his office and he said, I want to take the CIA and shatter it in 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds.
There you go.
And he recognized then and thereafter that he was surrounded by an intelligence apparatus and by Pentagon brass, his Joint Chiefs, whose the intelligence apparatus had devolved into a function of just providing this constant parade of new wars. And the Pentagon chiefs wanted to get into the war because that's how they get promotion. That's how they expand. He said at one point.
See, I wish I knew a little bit more. I didn't realize that he was, so focused on broader geopolitical issues. Because as you guys know, that's not really my strong suit. And Dave definitely knows a lot about that. So, I mean, everything that he's saying sounds like I'm right there with you. But I do not really know enough to be like, hold on, that's not true. But he does seem, number one, he doesn't seem to be saying anything that drastic. And number two, it makes sense. When it makes sense, it makes sense.
Yeah, we get it in a nuclear conflict with the Russians. And 30 million Americans die, 130 million Russians. And then who's in charge? It's going to be these guys, so they're going to win no matter what.
So the military industrial complex, these people are part of the government. These are government employees, and there is a line of succession. And so if everything goes to ish, then only better for them. Word up. Let us know, Opus.
And, he recognized that he was surrounded by this, this cabal that wanted to go to war. And my uncle, his best friend, one of his two best friends, Ben Bradley, who was the publisher of the Washington Post, asked him one day, what do you want in your gravestone? And my uncle said instantly, he kept the peace. And he said to Bradley, the primary job of a president of the United States is to keep the country out of war. And,
or at least it used to be. Certainly not anymore. It seems to be that is the only job of the president, is to find new wars and make the wars we're already in worse.
So if he, and he was able to do that during his regime. He never sent any combat troops abroad. He sent they wanted him to send 250,000 combat troops to Vietnam. They said it would fall. And he said, it's not our war. They need to win it themselves.
It's not our war. It's not our war. Why can't that be something that is way more, an idea that is way more ubiquitous? It's not our war. They need to win it for themselves. Because even if even if you don't necessarily completely subscribe to that, the idea that we're going to play world police, at the end of the day, what that means is that we have to continue being the world police. We can go in and fix the problem, but then as soon as we leave, then something else is going to come up. And so all we're doing is, literally taking over the whole world while people at home are starving and homeless and sick and crazy.
Sent advisors. He sent 16,000 Green Berets, and they weren't, by the rules of engagement, allowed to participate in combat, which they violated. But and 75 of them died. And he asked for a casualty report one day from one of his aides, and they came back and said 75. And he said, "We're not going to lose another one. This is not worth an American life."
Facts. It's not worth American lives. So he says, who created the Mexican cartels? The CIA. Who created Al Qaeda and half the terrorist groups in the Middle East? The CIA. Yep. That's what they do. That's their whole job. That's their whole job. So it says, because the more countries who participate, I feel like the more some companies can profit. Yep, that's exactly what they're talking about. Whether it's Lockheed Martin or Halliburton, is that still a thing? Like I said, this is not my area of expertise, but it's just money. It's just money. It's just business as usual. If your business is war, then you need war. And when you're in the pockets of the politicians, and you're like, hey, we need some third quarter boosts. Then it's like, all right, let's just go buy some nukes and drop them on somebody. Yeah, so Raytheon's another one. I mean, it's crazy.
And that day, this was October of '63, less than a month before he died. He signed a national security order that afternoon, ordering all those troops home by the end of '65, and the first 1,000 in the next month.
Zibby says, I wonder if the whole external war thing stems from missionary work. Step over the poor and needy around you for feel-good photo ops and other BS. Sounds like, I don't know if they're directly connected, but certainly that mentality is there with both. So good point there. Lars and Rune says, World War II was the last war that was necessary. Right? Yeah. Yep. All money laundering. That's all it is. And we're sitting here talking about this as if it's like some conspiracy, because many people would treat it that way. Like, what do you mean? The American government doesn't want to save us and make sure we're okay? The only reason we're over in Ukraine is because wake up, sweetie. Wake up. It's much, much, much darker than that.
And, by the way, he sent more troops, federal troops, to Jackson, Mississippi, to get Meredith into Ole Miss. So, this was a very minimal commitment. But he managed to keep Americans out of Vietnam and out of wars. He refused to go into Laos. He refused to go into Berlin when the military all wanted him. He figured out how to resolve.
There you go.
This huge conflict that we had in '62 at Checkpoint Charlie, and he became in the process friends with Khrushchev. And he put a telephone in our house, that's in my brother's house now. The lines are still coming out. But when we knew when we were kids that, his house at the Cape, which we wandered through all the time, walked in every day, that if we picked up that red phone, that Khrushchev would answer, because he didn't trust his own people. Right. And he knew Khrushchev didn't trust
good reason. Yeah, both probably for good reason. Right. It's interesting because one of the craziest aspects over the last year plus now during this war in Ukraine is that there isn't communication. And in fact, that Blinken brags about the fact that he's not negotiating with Sergei Lavrov, that he's not negotiating. And in fact, at least according to Fiona Hill's reporting and a couple other reports, that we've been discouraging negotiations between the Ukrainians and the Russians, and it's like, my God, I mean, just imagine if your uncle was not willing to talk to the Russians during, say, the Cuban Missile Crisis or something.
We would have wiped out.
So this is an area where, again, the reason that it's not my strong suit is because I don't trust information that comes out about, two sides that we don't have anybody on the ground that I already know. There's people that are trusted in general, but how do you, where are you reading that? Where are you seeing that? What report are you seeing or reading that you can trust on either side, whether it's Russian media or Ukrainian media or Americans going over and doing American journalism? It's just very weird to me that this is so polarizing, yet anyone can feel like they have good information. I'm not saying that they don't or they can't. I'm just saying I don't know how they do. Zippy says, well, the U.S. Is founded on Christian processes. Look at the overall lore and myth themes. There are similarities. It's easy to conflate and warp, but humans, is that not the next? It's easy to conflate and warp, but humans what?
Humanity.
Right. I mean, and so it's like the game that they're playing there's no language strong enough for how reckless it is.
It's insane. And the tell is that Zelensky calls up Prime Minister Xi from China and says to him, will you settle this war? Because I know that my supporters don't want it settled. And, by the way, Zelensky ran in 2019. He ran. Here's a guy who's a comedian and an actor, and which, I'm not saying in a disparaging way.
Go ahead. It's fine.
Opus says, Vladimir Zelensky was a U.S.-backed regime change. The Ukraine business was a long time coming. Unfortunately, I agree that it was a long time coming, but I don't agree that, not that you're saying it, but I don't think it was inevitable. I think that with the right people, it didn't have to, we could have de-escalated. But like we were talking about with the military industrial complex, there's just too many people who have too much to gain from this, not only this war, but every war, just conflict. That's how they make their money.
Married to one of those too. And but he won with 70% of the vote. And the reason he won is he ran on a peace platform. Yeah. And he ran saying, I'm going to sign the Minsk Accords. And people need to know the Minsk Accords were just to go through some of the history. Sure. In 2014, the Ukraine had a democratically elected government, Yanukovych. Mm-hmm. And that was neutral, but very open and welcoming to the Russia. And we overthrow that. Let me put it this way.
Yeah, Elvis is saying, imagine if Russia inserted a president in Cuba. You bet your ass we'd be going to war over that. And so the U.S. puts in Zelensky in Ukraine when there's, a lot of Soviet stuff going on that we don't need to be involved in. Cold War's over. The Cold War's over. Has been for my entire lifetime. But here we are, yet again, in a hot conflict with Russia. And if there's not already American boots on the ground, it's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are soldiers, U.S. soldiers out there, and they're just not saying anything. Again, where do you get this information that you can trust? But absolutely agreed, Opus. Absolutely agree.
We spent $5 billion creating protest movements to fund protest movements over there that ended in...
Hey, Stippy, do not forget that NATO is more hostile than Russia. Since NATO is backed by the U.S. Military industrial complex, there's more there's more offense that comes from NATO in general than Russia. And it's so many things follow this pattern that, like, if you just didn't push it so hard, then we wouldn't be getting such blowback. you can take it all the way. Yeah, tear down this wall. And the idea of all this pushback. I mean, as far as I can see it, like at least in my lifetime, in the early 90s, the religious right was very present in pushing back against just pop culture. And it was so much that then culture, artists and so on felt the need to push back against that. And here we are today with Drag Queen Story Hour. We had gay marriage that was probably way, way, way too important to some people. And now we have Drag Queen Story Hour. Not everything leads to LGBT stuff. Those are just two examples. But same thing here. If NATO isn't, and the US specifically, isn't knocking on all of these doors, then there's not going to be that many people who are like, hey, NATO, sit the fuck down. Oba said NATO overstepped its mandate and promised to Gorbachev that allowed for the dissolution of the Soviet Union. And and Putin said, stop it, NATO. Stop it, NATO. Stop it, NATO.
Shut up!
2014 with the overthrow of that government.
Yeah. Let's see. I want to rewind.
Let me put it this way. We spent $5 billion creating protest movements to fund protest movements over there that ended in 2014 with the overthrow of that government.
Yes.
And it's unclear how much America, the United States government, was orchestrating the actual violent part of that happened at the very end. But we do know that Victoria Nuland, who's one of the neocons, has been around since, forever, since the Iraq War.
Real deal neocon, Robert Kagan's wife, the founder of Project for New American Century, like real high-level neocon.
Yeah,
yes.
And these are the people who got us into Iraq.
Yes.
So, they went into Iraq. It was an $8 trillion mistake. And it ended up, with leaving Iraq much worse. As you pointed out, we killed 1 million Iraqis, far more Iraq. We killed more Iraqis than Saddam Hussein ever did.
Based. We killed more Iraqis than Saddam Hussein, who we went there to fight. Somehow connected to 9/11. We killed more than he did. Now, I didn't kill anybody. But the blood's on my hands just by living here, just by being part of the United States. When those in power, make these decisions, it represents all of us.
We left that nation this kind of incoherent mess, which is a battle between Sunni and Shia death squads. Mm-hmm. We pushed it into a proxy posture with Iran, which is the foreign policy objective that we've tried to avoid for 40 years. Mm-hmm. We created ISIS. We then,
Yeah, Opus, I do too. I remember watching those green and black night vision videos of the Scud missiles raining down on Iraq. And like, why? Obviously, we know why. We were just talking about the military industrial complex, but WMDs. I forget who it was, but somebody was just talking about how easy it would have been to believe that, the U.S. Or the CIA or whoever else could never want to do anything like kill a sitting president. That would be crazy.
What you talking about, Willis?
But looking back, in hindsight, kind of seems like exactly the type of thing that they would do. Zippy says, blame Saint Ronnie, Roland Reagan for corrupting NATO. No free money for the elite. No supersized military industrial complex. Can you tell me more about what you mean when you say no free money for the elite? Tell me a little more about, because I'm with you, but where are you going with that? Oba said, did you see that speech Bush was giving where he had the Freudian slip about the Iraq War? It was the greatest self-own in history. I think so. What? It sounds familiar. I don't remember off the top. What did he say? No, Yeah, what did he say? Because I do kind of remember that. I don't have it in my head though. Yeah, I can't think of what it was. But yeah, let's see.
40 years. We created ISIS. We then, it led into the Yemen war, it led into Syria, and we created 2 million refugees who then flooded Europe and destabilized every nation, every democracy in Europe, and probably almost certainly led to Brexit. And the break.
Oh, Brexit. That's a whole other story. And Larson Root says American, British, Latvian, and French boots on the ground in Ukraine. Leaked documents confirmed this last month. So again, I don't know, like leaked documents from where, from who, presented by who, in what form or fashion. Certainly, this is not information that we would want, or at least the establishment would want out there. And it just makes sense. But what I say? And months ago, I was saying it's only a matter of time, and I was right. Unfortunately, I was right. Oba said he was condemning Putin for his unjust war in Ukraine, but he said, "Oh, right. Yep, I do remember that." Yeah. Oh, Bushy boy. Oh, Bushy. Ronald Reagan and the neocons are the ones that opened up the dams on Wall Street gambling. Yep. And but I mean, all right, we'll leave that there.
But Europe, so that's what we got. And that $8 trillion that Victoria Nuland and her, and her gang spent. So now she wants to do the same thing, regime change with Russia, which they're very open about. That is the aspiration of the neocons. So they have her on a telephone, that was recorded, choosing the next cabinet when the government gets overthrown. Russia then, you put yourself, my uncle always said, you got to put yourself into the shoes of the adversary. Russia then says, okay, there's a U.S. government, there's a U.S. created government now in Ukraine on our border.
The Discord leaker leaked documents that confirm NATO personnel in Ukraine. Sad. I mean, and here's the other reason that I don't necessarily get too in the weeds with this stuff. Because there's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do about this. How am I supposed to fix this? How am I supposed to help this? How am I supposed to do anything? This is all just bad news coming my way. And I'm just supposed to sit with it. And so I guess, that's partly on me for not being informed enough to understand what the steps would be. But I mean, what can anyone do? It's a literal world war. What can anyone do?
The Russians are worried about Ukraine because they've been invaded 3 times through Ukraine. And the last time they were invaded in World War II, Hitler invaded through Ukraine and killed 1 out of every 7 Russians. Right. 13% of the country was killed. And we reduced to rubble 1/3 of the country. So they're sensitive about the Ukraine.
Yeah, who wouldn't be? And that's an argument that I'm going to come back to this, that doesn't really make sense when, these blind liberals who are just, waving their Ukraine flags on day one without having any idea. I'm paying attention to this stuff and I have no idea. Unless you're really digging in, then you're just not going to know. And then again, even if you do dig in, how do you know what to trust and what not to trust? But somehow these people who don't pay attention to anything have this strong, this something so deep inside themselves that they need to support Ukraine, which now is leading to NATO personnel, including Americans, on the ground. And what? For what? And they can't understand that there's actually a reason, even if you don't agree with what Putin is doing, which nobody should. I mean, I guess, right? I don't even know about that. But that it's just Russia bad, Ukraine good. America good, of course, but Russia bad. It's just, and yeah, Zippy saying, thank you for holding back and balancing assumption and plausibility. Thank you. I'm an ass, but I try but I try. But also getting tired of it all. It's so much easier to assume. But you know what happens when you assume? You make an ass out of you and me. Opus said, yes, the Slava Ukraine libtards. What does Slava Ukraine mean? Is that like long live Ukraine or something like that? Two things can be true at once. Ukrainians should be angry with the U.S. as they are with Putin. Makes perfect sense. But that's got two things true at one time. I'm a liberal. I don't. No. I just like good thing, not bad thing.
They don't want NATO in the Ukraine, and they don't want U.S. weapon systems in the Ukraine, and they made that really clear. So now they say, okay, now we have a hostile U.S. government, U.S. placed government in the Ukraine. And so they go in immediately and invade Crimea. Why? Because the U.S. They're scared that the U.S. Navy is going to make Sevastopol a U.S. base, a naval base, because the U.S. Navy is already in the Bosphorus and the Black Sea. And
I don't even know where that is. I don't even know where that is.
And that's their nightmare. It's their only warm water port. It's been their port for 370 years.
I will say though, this is where trusting the pundits that you listen to. This is where it comes in, because I know that Dave Smith is very knowledgeable about geopolitics, about wars. He's talking about stuff all the time that you just don't see in the mainstream media, and even in a lot of the alternative media, which again is why I don't know a lot about it. But he's very into it and has been right about a lot of things in the past. So the fact that that RFK is not getting a lot of pushback from Dave Smith means one of two things: either Dave Smith is just happy to have a presidential candidate on his show, or that ANCAP Libertarian Dave Smith and Democratic presidential hopeful RFK Jr. agree on foreign policy. Slava Ukraine, glory to Ukraine. All right, I mean, if you say so.
So we would do exactly the same thing if we were in that position. We would go in and we would take control of the port.
Yeah,
it's critical to our national security. Before the U.S. Navy arrives.
Sure. Go ahead.
And then, then the U.S. Meanwhile, Trump walks away from the Intermediate Nuclear Weapons Treaty, which had was critical to Russia. We also walked away from the ABM Treaty. We start funneling offensive weapons in to Ukraine, and we start training the Ukrainian army for interoperability with NATO.
Oh, kind of like how we train the Afghani army, the Afghani army, right? I'll remember the jumping jacks video where they're like, can't even do a regular jumping jack, and that's their military. Sad. Pathetic.
And so the Russians are looking at this. Plus, the new government comes in, and the nation and starts killing Russians in the Donbass, ethnic Russians in the Donbass. The people vote. Donbass then has an election, and they vote to join Russia. Russia says, we don't want it.
Yeah.
We don't want to break up Ukraine. Here's what you do. And they work out with Germany and France the Minsk Accord. The Minsk Accord says, okay, Donbass is going to say part of Ukraine, but it's going to be autonomous, so they can have their own language, because the new government had banished the Russian language.
Right. That was their first act. The first act after they came in, right?
So, as I'm listening to this story of what happened, whenever somebody is telling their interpretation of how we got to where we are, the question always is present and never answered. Why does the U.S. need to get involved? Why? There's just no good reason. And any illusion that people are under that us getting involved would help, as opposed to, just not getting more people dead, more money spent, more BS all around the world. We just got out of Afghanistan. Hey, we got wall reds in the building. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the party. Said RFK is going to reform the Democratic Party. Very interesting. He definitely doesn't sound like any Democrat I have seen in a long time. Wall red said he's got his vote. Awesome, awesome. Welcome to the party. Yeah, I'm not familiar with RFK. This is the first I am experiencing of him, and we have a short speech after this we're going to check out, but this is him on the Part of the Problem podcast with Dave Smith. Welcome, brother. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Yeah, so they were treating the Donbass like redheaded stepchildren and, like foreign, threats.
It says the Bosphorus connects to the Black Sea, to the Aegean, and eventually the Atlantic Ocean. Russia's only year-round access to worldwide shipping lanes. Now to make a sense. Thank you, Opus. Zippy said the Dems are going to drop RFK so hard, he's either going to be killed or outcast. Killed? Killed? I don't know about killed, but I definitely don't see this guy going far, not because of his merits, but because of the DNC. I definitely agree with you there. And Opus says because the ports in the north are frozen most of the year, so that's their only access. Now it'll make a sense.
And the Russians who lived in the past voted to go to Russia. Russia doesn't want them, but Russia supports the Minsk Accords. So, and the Minsk Accords get NATO.
I love how the captions can't even get the words right because he
said pledge that NATO will never envelop Ukraine, and that Donbass will have an autonomy within Ukraine, so it can have its own language, have its own culture, and protect its citizens from aggression by the Ukrainian government. And Zelensky runs in 2019 saying, "I'm going to ratify the Minsk Accords." But he gets in there, and then the U.S. government moves in and says, we don't want that. We want a war with Russia.
Oh, they want it. They want it, and now they've got it.
And, now, I think anybody in Ukraine would accept the Minsk Accords with, that outcome, which I think is going to be hard to reach at this point because...
Yeah.
So is that him saying that, like, based on how this is all played out, that Ukrainians probably would have, in hindsight, been like, oh, we should have done that instead of bringing NATO into all of this, instead of cozying up to Biden with Zelensky's camo pants and his green shirt? Maybe we should have been a little bit more strategic about this. Opus says the Donbass wants to be Russian, or at least Russian adjacent. Yeah, that's another piece that, as I understand, it's if not America directly, but NATO wanted the Donbass region to be part of Ukraine and not part of Russia. And Donbass wants to be part of Russia, and Russia wants Donbass to be part of Russia. Is that accurate? Because, again, the question is why? Why? Zippy says the CIA and the Kennedy curse is never ending. I hope not, but the truth is sadly stranger than fiction. Another dun. I hope not. I hope not. If that's the case, I hope he loses.
The Russians have now already changed their constitution to make Donbass part of Russia.
All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is
Let's not.
Product Denver tonight. Use POT of your unsafe buyout for
that's a long ad.
A couple things that come to mind, and I know you know this, but in that cable from that was released by WikiLeaks,
Oh yeah, let's not forget about that whole aspect of it. The fact that there's literal Nazis in that we're backing right now. I completely forgot about all that. Completely forgot. Yeah, neo-Nazis in Ukraine have been committing terrible acts in the Donbass, and like I feel like the Ukraine waving liberals are believe that there is a world that could exist where everything is just fine. Theoretically, sure. But that is not the world we live in, and it's certainly not ever going to be anytime soon. Certainly, if we keep instigating things, we have to let people work things out on their own. You know, as a dog trainer, this is something that a lot of dog parents don't understand. When it comes to, you know, their new puppy playing with other dogs, then whether the dog is super scared or the dog is super excited and doesn't realize that they're being overly aggressive or whatever, you got to just throw them into the deep end. You know, obviously you want to have some basic training first, but at a certain point, you just got to go to the dog park or meet up with a friend who has a dog and let them work it out. And the dog that is more mild is going to expect you to save them and to protect you from this dog that's, you know, jumping on over them and trying to play and they don't want it and whatever and whatever. And that dog has to learn, okay, I need to learn how to stand up for myself. And then the more aggressive dog has to, you know, this trying to do that to the same dog, and the dog's running away, not engaging. And they have to learn, okay, well, if I want to play, then I've got to learn how to, play well with others. How is that not exactly what needs to happen with America? We need to realize that going so hard all the time in terms of world police is not a good idea.
Yet means yet. Memo back to Condoleezza Rice. So this was Bill Burns, who is the current head of the CIA. He himself, when he was informing the Secretary of State, the memo basically reads that, hey, if you continue with this talk about Ukrainian entry into NATO, Russia's very concerned that this is going to happen and this is going to happen. And if there's a civil war, Russia will have to decide whether to intervene. And he says, in his own words, the head of the CIA, he says, a choice Russia does not want to have to make. And it seems pretty clear that they did not want it to get to this point. Now, again, people who hear this will say, so you're justifying Putin invading the country.
You love
yes,
Putin.
which is nonsense. Of course he's not justified in invading. But let's just understand the situation here. That
he's not justified, but we're dealing with other human beings. As horrible as you may think that Putin is, he is, in fact, a human being. And understanding the situation is crucial. Just like in the Saw movie, it was crucial to understand Jigsaw in order to get out of the game. Just like when I was doing drugs, it was crucial to understand how powerful they could be in order to not become a dopehead. And same thing here. We have to understand the situation so that we don't make the wrong moves to make it worse. I mean, we already have, but Zippy says, given how warped the Dems are, well, the Reapers too. But given how they are, politically crucify good or half-honest people is what they do. It seems politics only likes grifters. Bars. Facts. Based. Open said, well, we made a promise to Ukraine that if they relinquish all the hundreds of Soviet nukes back to Russia, that we would protect them. However, we marched them right into this war. Yeah. Stop hitting yourself.
It does seem that he wanted to avoid this. And it seems like, man, the higher ups in the U.S. government wanted him to be put into this position. And as Zbigniew Brzezinski bragged in his memoir, that they wanted to lure the Soviets into Afghanistan to give them their own Vietnam, that this seems like, once again, that's the play. We've done it before, and it seems like we probably did it again. And look, like, again, and the last thing I'll say, and then I'll turn it over to you, because I know we got to wrap soon. Your uncle, I think, very reasonably said, when the Soviets wanted to put missiles in Cuba, he said, no, that is a deal breaker for
Who said that earlier?
us. Like, I know technically Cuba is not U.S. territory, but you cannot have nuclear missiles pointed at our country from a few miles off of our shores. That is a deal breaker. We will not stand that. We're taking that as an act of aggression. And almost all Americans look at that and say, yeah, that's reasonable. That's reasonable to say there's no reason for Russian missiles to be a few miles off of our border. And before Putin invaded, to say, hey, Ukraine cannot be a part of your military alliance, I think is a reasonable position for the Russians to have. And I think there's nothing wrong with admitting that.
Yeah, absolutely reasonable. Is it great for everybody else? No, but that is why there's that is what politics is. What's good for me may not be good for you. But we all have to try to find a way to live peacefully. And this ain't it.
My uncle And my father made the deal with Khrushchev. They made a secret deal.
Right.
And the secret deal was, we will take the U.S. The reason Russia wanted to put the missiles in Cuba is because we had put Jupiter missiles in Turkey.
Right, right.
And by the way, Ukraine, there's parts of the Ukraine that are only 400 miles from Moscow. That's a lot farther than Cuba was from Washington, D.C. Oh, you know, the threat, and we have a rule in our hemisphere. We've never been invaded. We have a rule in our hemisphere called the Monroe Doctrine that says nobody can put any weapons or any of their soldiers, no European country can put any of yours or Asian country
right.
anywhere in our hemisphere, even Argentina, Tierra del Fuego. You're not allowed to do it. So, you know, for us to say, okay, we're going to enforce that here, but we're going to have a different set of rules for Russia.
Rules for thee, but not for me.
Russia's the enemy. And by the way, when did Russia become the enemy? You know, when we decided, we told.
See, that's weird. The fact that Dave doesn't even have like a quip there for when did Russia become the enemy. You know, obviously they weren't really the enemy in the Cold War, and you know, the Red Scare was a real thing. So maybe they're just talking on a level where that's obviously a rhetorical statement, but my eyebrow is going up a little bit. Skeptical hippo eyes.
Russia in 1991 and 1992. We were trying to get, you know, Gorbachev said, look, I'm going to dismantle the Soviet Union. You need to make me a pledge. You're not going to move NATO to the east, because what did that mean, dismantling the Soviet Union? It meant allowing reunification in Germany. There are 400,000 Soviet troops in Germany. So, and Gorbachev agreed to remove those troops and allow NATO to take over Germany. So he was allowing, you know, a hostile force to take over and moving his own troops out. But he said, you got to promise me before you do this. And we, you know, there's all of these documents that are now available in the archives.
Oh, sure. I promise. Whatever you say. So he says, after the fall of the Soviet Union, they could barely afford to take care of themselves. And now they are our biggest enemy. Maybe China, but in terms of, you know, imminence, certainly there is the threat. Opus says we should have made Russia our new made in China and drop China trade wise like a bad habit. Oh, drop China trade wise like a bad habit. Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. How would that work out? Because I mean, it sounds really good. And it'd be a grace. So yeah, I mean, the certainly having the bifurcated global perspective doesn't help. So you know, one enemy is definitely better than two. But we got Lars and Rune saying USA blew up the Nord Stream pipeline last year, so Russia wouldn't be able to supply Europe with fuel. But now we'll supply Europe money. And notice Biden just opened a new drilling in Alaska by ConocoPhillips. Money. Hey, we got Melted Mind Media in the building. What is good? Welcome to the party, brother. Good to see ya. Oh, hold on one sec. Hold on. Melted Mind Media is an awesome YouTuber, and I would love for you to go check him out. Just drop the link to his channel. How you doing, buddy? Welcome to the party. Hey, we also got David Banner in the building. Welcome to the party. So China's the largest manufacturer of many things worldwide. Good luck separating from them. Well, that's, I think, the idea is that if we could have gotten there before that was the case, then, you know, it wouldn't be that way. China's built up enough. They can afford to deal with China's own crap. Facts. New oil, but none for the people.
You cannot move.
Oh, Oh, we got the super sticker from Lars and Rune. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. And you know, every single super chat comes with a treat for Morty. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Very much. Much appreciated. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Move NATO to the east. And Bush told before you do this, and we, you know, there's all of these documents that are now available in the archives. You cannot move NATO to the east. And Bush told him, we will not move NATO 1 inch to the east. Well, now we've brought it 1,000 miles to the east. We have 14 countries. We put Aegis missile systems, which are nuclear adaptable.
Right.
So they brag, Lockheed brags on the, you know, the manufacturer's promotional materials. These will take the Tomahawk missiles, which have nuclear warheads and can be in minutes in Moscow.
Oh, great. Fantastic.
We put those in Romania. We put them in Poland. And clearly, you know, they were worried that we were now going to make Ukraine.
Make use of them? Make use of the missiles we put right on their doorstep? Why would they think that?
Part of NATO and put them there. So to say that they don't have some legitimate security, national security concerns is I don't know. There has to be something. You have to have some kind of cognitive dissonance.
Isn't that what, you know, that's what it seems like to me, is that by coming to bat for Ukraine, that NATO, and again specifically the United States, is trying to make Ukraine kind of you know, feel like they are owed to, you know, be a part of NATO. And because they are separate from Russia, then the, you know, the whole not 1 inch to the east or whatever. I think that, am I on the right track? Somebody help me out here. Opus said he is definitely saying all the things. Okay, fair enough.
And you know, to the point that you were making about kind of how the mission had changed from that, because my son went over there to fight. So, you know, my son didn't tell anybody what he was going to do. And my son Connor, and I told him he had a summer job for Baum Hedlund, which is one of the best law firm on the West Coast. And he was going to live with us. And I was really excited about it. And he, you know, at the beginning in spring, I said, when do you start work at Baum Hedlund? And he said, I gave them notice I'm not going there. And I was like, well, what are you doing? And he said he was at dinner with me and Cheryl and his girlfriend, who knew what he was doing but didn't tell us. And he said, I'm doing something, and Dad, I don't want you to ask me what I'm doing.
That's, I don't have any kids, but I'm certain that's something a father never wants to hear.
And then he disappeared. And so, you know, Cheryl and I were like, wow, that's unusual. But, you know, what do we?
Wow, that's unusual. Dad, I'm going to do something, but you can't ask me what. And then I disappeared. And your reaction is, wow, that's unusual. Where's the story going?
Going to do with it? He's a grown up. So then he disappears, and we do see a credit card bill. I had access to his credit card bills, and we saw a credit card bill from Poland. So I thought, oh, he may be, you know, doing something in Ukraine. And then we got another one from the Ukraine, and then they just stopped. And for 2 months, we didn't really hear from him.
What?
And he joined a special forces unit. He joined the Foreign Legion. He was assigned to a special forces unit, and he was a machine gunner for the Union. So he went over there because he was motivated for the same reason that they take advantage of all Americans. I'm not saying he was taking advantage of it. I supported, you know, support for the Ukraine. And
you support the support for Ukraine, but you don't support Ukraine. You just support the support for Ukraine.
What?
What you talking about, Willis?
Oba said, a Kennedy think about what? A Kennedy? Are you just saying a Kennedy think about that White Knight story? Is that the inflection there? Commas, periods, guys. Come on, help me out here. This is the stuff of Arthurian legends. Oh, nice word there. Arthurian. The sun.
And he did too. And he thought, you know, I shouldn't, but I argued with him a lot about the Ukraine, and he felt like I shouldn't be arguing and, you know, for it, and letting other people fight for it. Oh, he went over there, and for the same reason we all did. It was a humanitarian. We have huge compassion for the Ukrainian people who've been illegally invaded, and the brutality and violence of the invasion, and for admiration for their valor and their courage in standing up, this incredible courage they've demonstrated. But then, it starts looking a lot less like a humanitarian mission.
As we said, there's a middle ground where you need to try and protect the common people from the madness of war. And that doesn't seem to be on the agenda at all for anybody. It's not about the common folk. It's just about, are you elite? Are you in the elite party? Okay, then what you think, what you want, what your safety matters. Otherwise, oh well.
Every choice we make is about prolonging the war.
Right.
And it's not about, if it's humanitarian, it means curtailing the war and reducing the bloodshed. Then Biden comes out and says, what we're doing over there is actually regime change against Putin, which is this old ambition of Victoria Nuland and the neocons.
No, not happening.
And then Lloyd Austin, who's the Secretary of Defense, says that, our purpose over there is to degrade the Russian army and exhaust its capacity to fight anywhere else in the world. Well, that's the opposite of humanitarian.
Right.
And as he said, the opposite of humanitarian, as Opus says, the Ukrainian culture will never recover from this loss of their men. Anybody have any argument against that? But yet there's still so much establishment support. He just said he supports the support. What the fuck does that mean? Zippy says, pretty much, if you go over there to help, it's a hell of a thing because you have to deal with those in power and they want more war. They all do. That's where the money comes from. The money.
That is a war of attrition. And who is getting killed? It's the, Ukrainians. And I've used this figure that 300,000 Ukrainians, that we know the U.S. government and Ukrainian government are lying about the cost to Ukrainian kids, how many have died in this war. But when General Zaluzhny and Vladimir Zelensky came to Washington in December, they had a private meeting in the Pentagon with Mark Milley and with who was the head of the Joint Chiefs and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. And during that meeting, some of the staffers said afterward that Zaluzhny said, we have lost 300,000 troops already. And I talked to Colonel Doug McGregor yesterday, who was the former senior advisor.
Yeah, we've had him on the show before. He's great.
Yeah, he's terrific. And he said that it's probably at 350,000 now because 2,000 were killed this weekend.
Right.
Ukrainians, and they're killing, the Russians are killing Ukrainians at a rate of 5 to 1 or 6 to 1, but it's not, I feel like, okay, we were tricked. This was not a war of humanitarian war.
No. I was says, if anyone thinks there's a scenario where Ukraine wins this thing that doesn't end in Russia using tactical nukes, they are smoking crack.
That's racist!
I don't know. I was throwing something there. I don't have anything to say. Yeah, man. I mean, it's crazy how much agreement we have between, we have Christians and atheists, we have liberals and conservatives and libertarians and someone running for president, and we're all on the same page with this. So again, we come back to the question, why are we involved in this? Somebody says, no Benjamins today, but too many doggy treats. Well, we got some right here, but I'm just waiting on you guys.
We have turned Ukraine into a pawn in these, geopolitical machinations that have created this proxy war between two great powers. And we're grinding this poor little nation to dust in between them. And Ukraine will be lucky if it comes out as a country, even at this point. The Russians, this is a critical issue with the Russians. They cannot lose this war. Right. It would be like us losing a war to Mexico.
That's a great analogy. And the idea that, Opus is saying that, there's any way that Ukraine wins. There's just no scenario where Russia, Mother Russia, is gonna just be like, okay, I guess, you can keep your thing. Okay, let's just go home.
What?
That is not ever going to happen. So what are we doing? What are we doing? Zippy says the win I see, Ukraine is a wasteland that's rebuilt by NATO and Russia paid off. Probably right. Probably right.
You know, we can't afford to do it.
Nope.
And if China, was putting missiles in Mexico, and Mexico was killed 14,000 American expatriates, we would go in and stop it. And we can't afford to lose it. And for us, Ukraine is an afterthought. It has nothing to do with our national security.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with our national security.
The job for the Russian is critical, and our national security should dictate that we should not be at war with Russia, because our primary adversary right now is China. And pushing the Russians into alliance with China, as Kissinger said, is the worst possible outcome for national security of the United States.
Right. There was always the argument of which is more of a threat. There's the trade stuff with China, and there's the tactical war stuff with Russia, and then both of them are not. Both things could be an issue from either country, and then you've created a situation where they can team up. Why? I have not heard anything from any politician on any side from any country who has given a reason we need to do this because, except to say the Ukrainian people are hurting and losing and this and that. And as Opus points out, this isn't helping. This isn't helping
America.
And it's already been achieved, it seems. It seems like we've pushed them into an alliance. It's funny, just as you mentioned, I told you before we started recording that kind of my political origin story was the Ron Paul campaign in 2008. And this was really essentially the point he was making when he was talking about why there is so much hatred for us in the Muslim world. And he was saying, well, look at our foreign policy and how many Muslims get killed over there. This makes them very angry. And it's just like the most basic, just put the shoe on the other foot. Like, just as you're saying now, like, it's crazy to me that people can't just see this. Like, what would we do if Russia was interfering in Mexico and overthrowing their government and putting military bases in there? And it's like, oh, yes, obviously we wouldn't put up with that. So of course we can expect that they wouldn't either. This to me just seems like common sense, but I'm very glad that someone who's running for president and someone who's doing as well as you are is actually saying this. So before I've been told we got to wrap. What can people do if they want to support your campaign or find out more about you? What's any?
And stick around, guys. I got another short speech from him that might be a little more fraught for commentary.
Website, or where can they go?
They can go to Kennedy24.com. And please, God, please do so. And, if you can contribute, do that. If you can volunteer, do that. Let me make one other point.
Of course, absolutely.
When my uncle was president, he kept us out of war. And he said, I don't want the face of America abroad to be a soldier with a gun. I want them to be a Peace Corps volunteer.
Right.
And he launched the Kennedy Milk Program that provided nutrition to millions of undernourished kids all over the developing world. He launched the Alliance for Progress and USAID to try to build the middle class to go around, no longer support military dictators, but to actually build the middle class. He said there's a revolution that's going to come in these countries, and either Russia is going to own it or we are going to.
Hey, Lars and Runes come through for Morty, and we're going to give him a peanut butter banana treat. There you go, more. Thank you so much, Lars and Rune. And of course, that makes you the new sponsor of the stream. Let me get this banner for you as we finish up this podcast, and then we'll head into the other speech.
And we want to be on the side of the oppressed. America should be. And, as a result of that, there's more statutes to my uncle. There's more boulevards named after him, more avenues, more universities and hospitals than any other U.S. president. And that's good for our national security. I'm just saying this because it's the inverse of what Ron Paul said. Right. And what we ought to be doing is not projecting military power abroad. We ought to be projecting economic power, which is what the Chinese do. We should build ourselves as my grandfather said, America should be Fortress America. We arm ourselves to the teeth around our borders and make ourselves too expensive to conquer. And then we put all that money into building infrastructure and building a generator for economic growth, because that is the real power of a nation.
There we go. Thank you again, Lars and Rune, for sponsoring the stream.
He was a great Yale historian. Did this book called The End of Empires, or Decline and Fall of Empires. And he goes through all the empires over 500 years. And each one of them met its demise through overextending its military abroad.
Yep.
Right. And why do we want to follow that? The Chinese learned the lesson from my uncle. They're projecting that we've spent $8 trillion since Iraq, bombing bridges and airports and ports and hospitals and homes. And they've spent $8 trillion, the same amount, building those things. And they have permanent friendships. And our friendships, are like, I said this on the part of this metaphor on the All In podcast the other day, that we're like the alcoholic who's behind on his mortgage, and he goes into the bar with the milk money and he buys rounds for strangers, and he thinks he's making friends.
Yeah, that's right.
But
That's
the
a good analogy.
That money runs out, they're no longer his friends.
That's a great analogy. Let's run that back, because that is a great analogy.
We're like the alcoholic who's behind on his mortgage, and he goes into the bar with the milk money and he buys rounds for strangers, and he thinks he's making friends.
Yeah, that's right.
But the moment that money runs out, they're no longer his friends. And that's what we've done. That's our strategy around the world. The Chinese go in, they don't ask attached. They build you a road, they build you a hospital, they build you a university, and people want to do business with them. And the whole world now is, Brazil just went over to switch the Chinese currency. Argentina's about to go. They just brokered a deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran.
Get rid of your fiat currency. And this is not financial advice, but buy Bitcoin.
And they're switching to Chinese. That's going to cost us, the loss of that global currency is going to cost us a minimum of $750 billion a year. Yeah. $750 billion. And, we're letting it all happen because we're addicted to war. And, look, as commander in chief, I'm going to defend our country. But I'm going to ask this question: is this important for U.S. national security?
That's a great question, because we know the answer to this specific entanglement. The answer is an astounding no.
Is that a bad guy? Not are we helping somebody? Is it good for this country?
Yeah.
And if it's not, I'm not going to do it.
Now, that would be such an improvement over current policy. I cannot tell you how much I hope Joe Biden makes the mistake of debating you. I really hope that.
Oh, that would be ripe for like Freedom Tunes. Just think of the voices. That would be hilarious. So I guess they're just going to close up here. So I have this speech here that it's just 15 minutes that he gave at Hillside College about a month ago. And it says Anthony Fauci and the public health establishment. So it seems like there should be more here for me to discuss, and never gonna happen. But I think it's interesting. Like I said, the power of understanding the pundits that you listen to and being conscious about how much do I trust this person. Because we just sat and watched an hour conversation of somebody I know very well and somebody I'd never heard of before. So all I have to go on, especially because I'm not very familiar with the actual topic of conversation, all I have to go on is how much is this guy agreeing with the guy that I trust. That's certainly not a stopping point, but it absolutely is a good starting point. So let's check out what this speech is, and let's get the captions on, and let's do it.
I'm very, very happy to be here. Can you hear me? If you can't hear me, raise your hand. I'm really happy to be here. It's although I've never been here before, it feels like almost like a homecoming because of the incredible role that this institution played during COVID-19, where it was the only college left in the country that really stood up for freedom.
Oh, I didn't know that. I know that a lot of conservatives do speak at Hillsdale, but I didn't realize that they had a specifically different COVID policy. Interesting.
And, this college was established in 1844. Abolitionists were despised by the vast majority, 90% of the people in our country hated them and thought they were crazy and that they, that they were unrealistic.
He's talking about like slavery abolitionists, right? Because absolutely, people, people's entire lives, people's entire communities, people entire, there's an entire industry that was held up by slave labor. So, yeah, definitely was not a popular position to start with. Opus says if the mainstream media weren't controlled by the Forever Party and they want to beat Trump, they would get behind RFK, because that is how you beat Trump. Independents will vote for RFK. I don't know. What does policy wise, because that's the thing with Trump, is that policy wise he's good. But people are too focused on how he behaves and the way that he says things. And that just, that will get enough people to dislike him. But certainly after a Biden administration, people are going to be a lot less pearl clutchy when it comes to, oh, how did he say that? And what tone did he use? And like, hey, are you going to fix this country? Are you going to fix the giant holes in our lives that has been created by the last administration and the ones before those? So, I mean, definitely from today, it does seem like RFK would be the strongest opponent to Trump. But even so, you really think that? Let's make a poll out of that. Who wins? RFK or Trump? Let me know what you think in the poll. Zippy says the nobles needed those slaves, and the peasants strangely supported the nobles. Almost like we just had a 2-hour conversation about something that doesn't make sense for the peasants, yet they strangely support the nobles.
Another one.
This is just how it goes, guys. People don't pay attention. So they look to the quote-unquote experts, to the elites, to the people who are put in charge, because there is an illusion that there's merit, that you are the leader because you deserve to be. Now, based on the rules, sure, okay. But the fact is that all you did is win a popularity contest. All you did is be less hated than the other guy. You didn't present anything that is actually that Americans can take home and say, hey, that guy is going to do this for me. They say, well, I hate both of them, but that guy's worse. It's just going to happen over and over and over again. So Opus says, yes, the mainstream media started championing RFK like they have Biden. Yes. Okay, fair enough. I don't know if I agree, but fair enough. Zippy says, RFK seems to be the fixer, but yikes, that is an uphill battle. Aren't they all?
And it wasn't really until 3 years into the Civil War that it flipped. And that, the president came out and freed the slaves, and he couldn't do it because the public antipathy. Abolitionism. So
apathy is not caring. Antipathy is hate. And, we should see in the, whether it's in the realm of Rona or in the realm of Ukraine, we absolutely should see this quick switch, because you can only keep the facade up for so long. And, Rona was bad. The after effects from all of that are coming. They are coming. And then, of course, if we are now in World War III, so probably wasn't a good idea. Eventually, the propaganda is going to only go so far. And people are going to start waking up. Hopefully. As he says, do you think Trump is his own worst enemy? That's a good question. Is he his own worst enemy? I don't think so. I think he could be, but the media wore that hat themselves. They're like, hold my beer, I'll be your worst enemy. Because, you're right with this, saying I'm being realistic, but I'm betting on Trump. But Trump has a 30 to 40% chance to fail. I don't know if I agree with 30 or 40, but to fail from hoof and mouth flubs. I don't know. I think people are a little bit more used to that by now. And they understand, like, okay, he doesn't say things the way we like him to say it. But the alternative is Biden. So we definitely don't want that. And so maybe we need to look past the tone of voice people are using and actually look at their policies. What do they stand for? What do they want to do? What do they want to do with me and my life? How is that going to be affected? I think we're not in the same world where acting president or not acting presidential is enough to be like, oh, I hate that guy. Trump just brought in a new era with that, I think. Opus said, but none of that can happen because, with the MSM behind him, none of that can happen because RFK will forever be as much of an outsider as Trump because of what they did to his father and uncle. Oh, that's a bar right there. That's true. There's no way that's spot on, brother. There is no way that he's ever going to be like, no big deal. I know what you did, but it's all right. It's just politics. It's just business, right? Not gonna happen. Trump needs to surround himself with better people. That I can definitely agree with 100%.
It's really this institution has an extraordinary history, and it's been very, very faithful to the values upon which it was established, which is this love of freedom, no matter what public opinion, no matter what the public cost.
Yeah, so as he was saying, I don't know if Trump says the wrong things and the media puts it on 24/7, it will end him. But he's going to have to say, so I disagree because I think we've already seen that. We've already seen that. People have already had that reaction, and a lot of people still will. But I don't think the entire left side of the aisle is going to react the same way because that Band-Aid has already been ripped off. We were in a world where being presidential was a thing, and then Trump comes in and just explodes that whole thing. So that's not really an expectation anymore. People already know Trump is Trump. So now that they're not going to be shocked by, oh, he said the thing, then they'll be better able to hear what he's actually saying. And again, not everybody, but enough people that I think it will definitely matter. Lars and Rune said, do you really think elections are not rigged one way or another? YouTube, I absolutely do not think that elections are rigged in any way. I promise. I really don't. I do not think that. Okay, Rune? I don't think that. I don't think that, okay? Head over to Discord. I might have something else to say. But on YouTube, absolutely, there is no way. Oba said the U.S. economy was booming and foreign policy, well, Trump crossed the DMZ and met with Lil Kimmy Kim, brokered peace in the Middle East for the first time in our lives. So that's another thing, is that he got shit done. When he was running in 2016, he didn't have a resume. Now he has a resume. Now the shock of, oh, he says things like that is gone. At least for the most part. So I think he's going to have a much easier time because people already know what to expect from him. Zibby says, I feel he could say much worse and the media taking it out of context, but yes, we may be Trump proof. And he definitely could. I'm definitely not putting any money on the fact that Trump is not going to say anything crazy. Certainly not making that bet at all. But he, like I said, I think we've just been desensitized. And once you're desensitized to, the first layer, the shock layer, then even if you don't like him, you're going to be better able to hear what the words are that he's saying, what the message is that he's trying to portray. Same. Even as a never Trumper, I died laughing when I think that was Megyn Kelly, right? And she was like, "Do you remember calling women fat pigs?" No, just Rosie O'Donnell. I was like, "Oh my God, got him!" That was hilarious. I wish he would. I wish he would do that every day. And he needs stuff like that. He needs stuff like that to highlight. Actually, yeah, he needs more sound bites like this, because we are already desensitized, as we were just talking about. And so the more that he gives the people who have no ammo by, oh, he said another thing, that's going to get tired really, 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 really fast. And the fact that there is people who will eat it up every day for years on end. Like, oh, Trump said this today. I got to be all up in arms about that. Those people will then, the flip that RFK is talking about with the abolitionists, I think that flip is going to happen. It's like, yo, we get it. Trump is an asshole. We get it. Do you have anything else to say about him? Oh, he said mean words. I don't like the way he said this, that, or the other. Okay, we got it. Is there anything else? Or can we get back to actually talking about politics? I think that, that was the MAGA stance for the last few years. But I think, the more they push it, again, going back to the whole pushback argument I was talking about earlier, the more pushback, the more people are going to get tired of it. So we'll see. So we said you can't factor in pre-COVID economy. Things are so much worse now. Yeah. But even though that is, a huge factor, that's not going to stop Trump or anyone who's running from specifically putting that on Biden. That's a huge thing that he, even though he inherited the virus, he inherited the situation, but things got worse. Things didn't get better. It's not like Trump did all this stuff and then Biden came in and made it all better. Trump did this stuff and it wasn't great and there was lockdowns or whatever. And then it got worse. It got worse. We learned more. We learned, and the virus got weaker. So all of these things, you pile them up and it's like, well, Trump is not that bad. He's just not. This is, you could look on my personal Facebook page now, and you'll see stuff from whatever 2015, 8 years ago or whatever, that I was going hard on Trump. I was going hard, and now here we are. Here we are. Start every day with a presser from the Oval. Rosie is a fat pig. We gotta have a good sound for that.
I'm not surprised, motherfucker.
Nate Diaz, that's what I got for you. Zippy says he's an asshole, but he's our asshole. Love your lovable asshole. Pause.
No matter who pressures you to stop, but to stand up for it. And it's really a testimony to something special. And the investment.
Wait, I forgot what I was talking about. Hold on.
The freedom, no matter what public opinion, no matter what the public cost, no matter who pressures you to stop, but to stand up for it. And it's really a testimony to something special. And the investment that has been made here, not in building a pile, teaching students to build a pile for themselves like most colleges, and whoever dies with the most stuff wins, but instead building character and demonstrating character. And, thank you.
They clap when I hit the clap. Zippy says, I tend to factor in the economy in 4 to 6 year spans. So things can only get better during the second term. If they're going to get better, that is. When you switch admins every 4, things can be less stable. That's true, but is that specific stability going to be like that will cause a certain level of instability? Does that outweigh the benefits of getting the right person, or at least a better person, in office? That's for each individual to decide. But that's what it is. It's weighing, the pros and cons. Ove said, yeah, the left seating America is great to the right was one of their biggest mistakes. Super facts. Super facts. How did you make patriotism for the country that you live in, that you are voting for, bad?
What you talking about, Willis?
Somebody last night asked me about how I got into the anti-vax racket, and
Research.
which I'm not anti-vaccine, although I'm kind of the poster child for the anti-vax movement. But I've been an environmental attorney for now 40 years. Up until 2005, that's all I did. And then that year, I ran a group called Hudson River Keeper, which I represented for 40 years, commercial fishermen on the Hudson and recreational fishermen.
So he's an environmentalist. All right. Zippy says, oh no, it's just hard to pin down things on one admin when it's more of a domino effect, mostly driven by Congress. Oh, Zippy, you and I understand that. We here understand that. But we're talking about your average voter. They don't think about things like that. Economy bad. Who's the president? Biden. Biden bad. So when you have an argument that, when it's coming, if it's coming from Trump, then okay, then Trump bad, Biden good. But if somebody like RFK or anybody else on a Democratic debate stage can just pin it all on Biden, it's going to play with some people. There are people who are going to be like, yeah, it's totally Biden's fault. That's politics. It's not about the truth. It's about what people think and feel. And Opus says, I'll pull this up as soon as it comes up. It's actually not that hard. Trump enacted trade policies that favored the U.S. and China. Favored the U.S. and China didn't like it, but they had to stomach it. Trump made things favorable for business and everyone flourished. Biden reversed it all. Don't tell me presidents don't affect the domestic economy. Of course they do. Of course. You remember when people were trying to say that Biden has no effect on the gas prices?
What?
No effect? Okay.
Suing polluters who are destroying their livelihoods, their property values, their communities. And they had a business model. We have the oldest commercial fishery in the country on the Hudson. The people I represented for 40 years, many of them came from families that have been fishing the river continuously since Dutch colonial times. It's a traditional gear fishery.
Yeah, it sounds like you're right. Zippy saying environmental lawyer sounds like he has to put up with the dealing with the BS from the EPA, basically helping a company comply with the regulations instead of setting the regulations. That sounds a little bit more like him, as well as I know him.
They used the same fishing methods that were taught by the Algonquin Indians, the original Dutch settlers of New Amsterdam, and then passed down through the generations. And they had a business model that worked for 3 centuries. And then they were put out of business by polluters who had political clout and who were able to manipulate government agencies, capture and manipulate government agencies in order to escape the discipline of the free market and force the public to pay their production costs. And they had turned the Hudson Valley into kind of a not free market capitalism, but corporate crony capitalism.
That's the only kind we got anymore.
And this corporate kleptocracy, which really is
kleptocracy. I've never heard that word, kleptocracy. I would love an actual definition on that. Kleptocracy. Because I know klepto means like stealing. Kleptocracy. Let's see. Many kleptocratic rulers secretly transfer public funds into hidden, personal, numbered bank accounts in foreign countries to provide for themselves if removed from power. Kleptocracy is the most common in developing countries and collapsing nations. That's us. We're collapsing. Whose economies are reliant on the trade of natural resources. Checks out.
Socialism for the rich and a very savage and brutal and merciless brand of capitalism for the poor.
Opus says, if an environmentalist comes on the stage championing modern, clean, safe nuclear as the only feasible solution, then I am 100% on board. Otherwise, they aren't even real people to me. Yeah, I don't see how you can have an environmental platform and not be all in on nuclear. It just doesn't track.
And they saw this happening. And, you know, I fought for them for 30 years, but in 2000, we were successful. I brought over 300 successful lawsuits on the Hudson. By the year 2000, we had forced polluters to spend $3.5 billion remediating the river. The river, when I started working there, caught fire. It turned colors, depending on what color. They were painting the trucks at the GM plant in Tarrytown. It was dead water, zero dissolved oxygen for 20 miles north of the city, 20 miles south. Today, it is an international model for ecosystem protection.
So Smitty says, one of the old car guys I watch, he was talking about salt batteries. Could be a game changer for the high-priced lithium ion. Salt battery. So how is that like? How is that different from the type of batteries that we have? Obviously, the salt part, but what, functionally, what's different about them?
It's the richest waterway in the North Atlantic. It produces more pounds of fish per acre, more biomass per gallon than any other waterway in the Atlantic Ocean north of the equator. It's the last major river system left in Atlantic that still has strong spawning stocks of all of its historical species of migratory fish. And the miraculous resurrection of the Hudson inspired river keepers on waterways all over the world. We became the biggest water protection group in the world. We have 350 water keepers. Each one has a patrol boat. They each patrol a local waterway, and they litigate against polluters.
So we got in our poll a 60-40 split for Trump. So I'm going to put up one more poll. And I want to ask you guys, there is somebody who, there's a video I'm pulling up where somebody is fact checking RFK's like his presidential announcement speech. So that video is about 18 minutes. So we can either finish this and head to Discord, or we can finish this and go to that. So the poll is going to be, should we keep going with the other video or go to Discord after party? Let me know. You guys will decide.
We're a law enforcement organization. We have great environmental laws, but because of agency capture, they're almost never enforced. And so, but we're allowed to enforce them under, a provision called the citizen supervision.
Opus says, I think they could make cars that sip gas that would be perfectly feasible for use in perpetuity. Sip gas. What does that mean? My mom knew a guy who worked on this, and goons came to his door and put the fear of God in him. Oh, wrong one. Must have been onto something.
In 2003, the National Academy of Sciences published a report that showed that every freshwater fish in North America, 10-year study, was contaminated with dangerous levels of mercury. And so the water keepers who represent fishermen were particularly, this seemed to us like we were living in a science fiction nightmare, where my children, the children of every American, could now no longer engage in the seminal primal activity of American youth, which is to go fishing in the local waterway and then come home and safely eat the fish. And those companies had privatized the public commons, a resource that is owned by the public.
How dare
make
you?
profits for themselves. They had privatized. We no longer own the fish. The companies
we no longer own the
which
fish.
is coal burning power plants and cement kilns primarily. So in 2005, we started suing them. A lot of people were suing coal plants, but we were suing them. The water keepers were suing them on mercury. And I had 40 suits going by
It's very interesting to me that, there is no overlap. And I know this is just a short speech, and the other podcast was, just an hour. So there's a lot of stuff to talk about if you're going to be president, but there's zero overlap. And so, in just this whole stream is really just trying to get a picture of like who this guy is. I'm sure, in the coming months, not anytime super soon, but if something comes out where there's a good discussion where he's touching on culture war issues, because I would absolutely need to know, like, where do you fall on this trans stuff? Where do you fall on social motion? Where do you fall on guns? All that stuff. I would be very interested to continue and do a follow up, but it's hard to get a read on this guy just from what we're looking at. Indie Film says 1985 Honda Civic HF. Got 50 miles per gallon. For some reason, that can't be done today. I think it can, but that doesn't help the gas companies, does it?
2005, and I was traveling all around the country talking to crowds like this about mercury. And
Mercury?
at almost every speech I gave, these groups of women, and they were different at every place, would come and sit in the front row before they'd show up early. And then when I finished, they'd wait and they'd ask to talk to me. And as it turns out, they were all of them with the mothers of intellectually disabled children. And they all believed that the vaccines had caused their child's injury, particularly mercury vaccines. And they would say to me in a very respectful, but also kind of vaguely scolding way, if you're really interested in mercury exposures to children, you need to look at vaccines.
That's a good, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. That if you're talking about the mercury in the water and how that affects people, there's mercury in the vaccines. And I'm not making any statement about whether that, anything, but I'm just saying that makes sense that somebody would say that. And again, it does have me questioning what I thought I always knew. So because I don't understand why factories and plants can't have large cat converter facilities. Then they can sell off the mineral-rich byproducts. Oh, the mineral-rich byproducts. Gotcha. It's a win-win. Why they can't convert the... I mean, the only thing I can think of is money. Is that it probably costs money to get that infrastructure there, and it wasn't thought of originally. And so it's just like, well, this is how we do things. But you're right. Yeah, that seemed, sounds like a win-win to me. Oprah said, we know heavy metals are very dangerous. Yep, that's why we have the cobalt mines. We have children slaves going to get our phone batteries.
I didn't want to do it. I had spent a lot of my life working on the issues of intellectual disabilities. I was raised, was part of the DNA of my family. My Aunt Eunice, who was also my godmother, started Special Olympics. I had been working in Special Olympics, which was then called Camp Shriver, since I was 8 years old. Every weekend as a hugger, as a coach. I spent 200 hours as a teenager in high school working in Wasaic Home for the Retarded. My family...
Y'all heard that, right? Am I going crazy?
I spent 200 hours as a teenager in high school working in Wasaic Home for the Retarded.
A high school working in, because the captions are saying, in what I say, I come for the, but it sounds like he said school for the retarded.
In high school working.
Let's slow it down. Let's see if going sub.
In Wasaic Home for the Retarded.
He definitely said a home for the retarded, right? Am I going crazy here? Y'all heard it too. Whatever. Okay. Melted Mind Media says catalytic converters use way too many valuable metals like platinum and it's just too expensive to make a big one. Without knowing jack shit about any of that. That's why. Money, 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 money. Zebby says, I don't think there's enough mercury in the vaccines. What we've seen over the last couple of decades is a deeper understanding of learning disabilities. That is where, this is what I was taught in school, in college, about this stuff, and that there, you would typically, because we're learning more about, just mental health and learning disabilities, personality disorders, and stuff like that, specifically under autism and the autism spectrum. Then the reason that people think that the vaccines cause the autism is because the autism will typically show up chronologically at the same time that you would be getting the shots. And so there is absolutely a correlation, but does that mean causation? Absolutely not. Does that mean that it can't be a causal factor there? It doesn't mean that, but we can't say. So he says I was called retard as a dyslexic. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. That's not nice. Opus said I think he volunteered in classrooms for the handy capable. Yeah, I mean he did, but it's just weird to me that Democratic just said retarded. Like you just don't hear that from Democrats. It was weird.
Family, my uncle was chair of the health committee for 50 years. My family wrote a lot of the legislation that gave rights and changed the...
I thought he was going to say it again. I thought he was going to say my family wrote a lot of legislation that gave retards this or that or the other.
Entire relationship with people, with individuals with intellectual disabilities, the most vulnerable population in the country. But I didn't want to do that for my life. I wanted to work on fisheries, on water pollution, on energy. And so I was dodging these ladies. And then one of them... I'm going to be honest
with you guys. Since we're going to keep going, I'm kind of over this. I don't really know what he's talking about, and he's boring me. So let's just move to part 3, fact-checking RFK on the All In podcast.
Today, I'm going to fact-check RFK Jr. He made an appearance on one of my favorite podcasts, All In. This is a podcast run by...
Do you guys know of the All In podcast? I never heard of that.
4 technology people who are all multimillionaires or billionaires, and they have a good discussion each week. I actually enjoy listening to it. They have different points of view, different political points of view. They let people flesh it out.
All right, get to it.
On this week's episode, they bring in RFK Jr. wasn't in that fluff piece. And in fact, most of the piece was the author's opinion of Elizabeth Holmes, not actually what she's saying or doing. In contrast,
oh yeah, Opus, we had it. That was a different time. We used to always say retard, the F slur. I just added that because I like it, and I still think it is a good way to describe something that is lame. So, if you think that's mean, then you're yeah, and it had nothing to do with being offensive to mentally ill people. It was just I'm blanking on who the stand-up comic is, but they had a joke like, you don't call a retard. You call your friends a retard when they're being retarded. That's it. So he said, well, retard was a common used word for mentally disabled. Sure, the kids would use it for everything, but everyone else, it just meant crippled. Remember what Carlin says. Well, what does Carlin say? I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is, but I'll let you go. Okay, so we got a cosign from Indy. Word up. All right, let's see.
All In lets the listener, the audience, decide. Did RFK Jr. make a point? It gives all the information to the audience, and I think that's the way we got to go forward in society. John Mandrell and I talk about that in this week's Sensible Medicine, how long-form interviews are the future. Having said that, because I have this opportunity, I can fact-check RFK Jr. and go through what he said right, wrong. Let's do it.
All right. Lockdowns. This is what I'm talking about. This is what I need to hear.
Jr. was strongly opposed to lockdowns. He states, quote, instead of a public health response to a public health crisis, we had a militarized and monetized response, which is the inverse response to what you would want to a public health crisis. And forgive me if that quote's a little bit off, but that's roughly what he said. I tried to transcribe it as best I could. RFK Jr. added that lockdown was not in the pre-pandemic playbook. Nobody thought it was a good idea. They thought the harms would far exceed the benefits, and it was generally thought to be avoided at all costs. What are my thoughts on this? Well, I think RFK Jr. actually has a point. He is correct that it was not part of pre-pandemic guidance. In fact, Bush administration commissioned many such documents about pandemic guidance, and it specifically said, you don't want to lock down. You certainly don't want to close schools at all, but the absolute worst situation, a situation we weren't even close to, you don't want to do that because the harms of these strategies are going to far outweigh the benefits. And I think he also has a point that it wasn't a public health response when you start to use the police state.
Shell shock. Yep, I remember that video. Opus says economists told us we couldn't shut down the world. That would be more damaging than the coof. And how? But I guess those are more scientists we don't listen to. They're not the scientists. They're just scientists.
Public health has always been about giving resources to people so that they can improve their own outcomes going forward. It's not to use the power of military force against the populace. I actually think RFK Jr. could strengthen his argument a little bit. He could ask the audience who benefited from the lockdowns. The answer is, of course, the major technology companies. They get you to stay at home, so you turn your attention to their product, Netflix, Amazon, YouTube, this platform. These are the companies that benefit from it, and so naturally, they would be happy to censor anyone who opposed those policies. They're happy to toe the line. Who was hurt by the policies was the mom and pop stores, the people who were just running regular businesses, restaurants, shops, regular people. They were hurt. And who did the bailout money go to? And also went to the rich. So RFK Jr. has a broader sort of argument that he makes in this podcast, which is that too much of the system is rigged in favor of the elites and hurts the middle-class working person. And I think this is a nice example of that. So on lockdowns...
There we go. So 1 for 1. All right, 1 for 1 RFK. The name of this channel is Vinay Prasad MD. Let's drop the link in... Oh, not save. Share. Let's drop the link in the chat because I don't have it in the description. Didn't know we would be here. Shout out to the doctor here. Thank you for letting us use your content.
I'll also add that the jury is still out to some degree as to whether or not lockdowns helped, and if so, under what circumstances. I would think that the final verdict will begin in the next decade or so. Very likely, there may be very specific situations in which people think some measures of lockdown had some benefit, but the vast majority of it is going to be thought of very poorly, unlikely to have made a major difference in outcomes beyond voluntary behavioral change.
Exactly. And this is what we were talking about when, what I was talking about when RFK brought up the abolitionists and saying that they were hated, the antipathy. But then it switched. It flipped. The propaganda only went so far. The morality, the core morality of what was actually going on became better understood. And it was inevitable that we would abolish slavery. It is inevitable that we will have to face the breadth of side effects from the entire lockdown regime. It's inevitable. Then you have the whole trans thing. The fallout from that is going to be biblical. Remember, 7 to 10 years. That's the time frame. 7 to 10 years.
Very likely has a whole host of secondary and tertiary externalities, particularly school closure, which was the most devastating and boneheaded policy decision never made. I think in the last 20 years of domestic policy, the dumbest decision.
Yep.
Number 2, stupid COVID policy. RFK Jr. makes one point, quote, police were pulling surfers out of the ocean and ticketing them, end quote.
Stupid.
He makes a good point here. In fact, I put a link in my Substack post to an article where it says UC San Diego virus expert pleads with surfers to stay out of the ocean to avoid coronavirus.
But why? There is no coronavirus in the water.
Public health did a lot of stupid things. They took the rims off basketball hoops. They closed playgrounds. They discouraged people from eating outside. And Australia, as Zeb Yamrozic points out, they actually prevented you from going on walks with friends. And
Yeah, this is the new smoke on the water. COVID in the water.
surfers out of the ocean. Now we know, of course, only an idiot would think that the virus is spread in the ocean. It isn't. Stupid. Actually, we didn't know that at the time. We actually knew outdoor spread was infinitely rare and had seldom been reported, and yet we didn't embrace that. We combined the police state with the visible, the public commons, and we combined that in a very inappropriate way. So I think RFK Jr. is correct there. That's a misuse of public power, and that is concerning and fits with his argument about lockdowns.
Another one.
All right, 2 for 2.
RFK Jr. is a big proponent of hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, and on that issue, I think he's completely wrong.
Oh,
Because the
okay.
way you validate hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin is the exact same way you validate masks, which is you conduct randomized control trials and look at the pooled point estimate. And in my Substack, I make available two of the largest meta-analyses on these topics. One on hydroxychloroquine, which just shows a stone cold negative point estimate and confidence interval. One on ivermectin, which shows the same, a stone cold negative point estimate and confidence interval. This is a pooled analysis of all the randomized control trials. And ironically, it's the same as the Tom Jefferson review on Cochrane and masking. So I'm the consistent party here. I'm going to judge
Are you though?
toddler masking, adult masking, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, dexamethasone, all the same, which is in pooled or randomized control trials. Do you improve outcomes? And the answer is masking, no. Hydroxychloroquine, no. Ivermectin, no. Dexamethasone, yes. And actually in people who are mechanically ventilated on oxygen.
Okay, fair enough.
That's where it works. RFK Jr. doesn't talk about the pooled analysis of randomized trials. He argues in favor of these products by saying, one, that African nations that people take hydroxychloroquine or take ivermectin, they had better outcomes. But this is really a bit of a stretch. This is very
Not
poor
Corona.
ecological data. And
Yeah.
we're comparing one nation to another nation. First thing I think you should know, and you all know, is that you do know these nations are not counting deaths the same. And that's a point that the podcast hosts make.
Oh yeah, they were counting them. Everything is a Rona death. Everything. And yeah, Opus is spot on. Being fit is number one. So we said COVID catch rate is what? Under 5%? No wonder they don't work, but people think they do. Well, it's under the catch rate. Yeah, something like that. It's a good thing. It's a good thing I didn't get it. Not because it's a totally innocuous, not totally innocuous, but not because it's not that likely for me to get it, but because I wore my mask, because I got my triple jab. Even though I got it, it totally would have been worse. Would it though? Probably not. Opus said, but we got told that we couldn't go out or go to the gym. It's not about health. It's about money.
You can't really compare Nigeria to the United States. They're not counting deaths the same in Nigeria, okay? We may be overcounting and they're likely undercounting. That's probably the way it is. All of the nations around the world did not count deaths the same. So it's very hard to make country-to-country comparisons. Moreover, there are lots of moving parts. It's not just that they take some hydroxychloroquine derivatives in other countries. They also have different age structure. They have different resources. They have different hospital capacity. They had different patterns of spread and social networks. And
yeah, Opus, I mean, this would be an argument if the masks, like if you're talking about, actually, I don't know exactly how the N95 masks function differently, but the reason that the breathing in your own carbon dioxide isn't an issue with a regular mask is the same reason it doesn't work for COVID. Because there's spaces. So when you breathe it out, like, I mean, it's uncomfortable. I hate wearing that, especially with facial hair. It gets all itchy. Then, I'll break out with freaking pimples at 30 years old because I'm touching my face every second. But if you just do this, it'll be harder to breathe. Or actually, you got to cover your nose as well. It'll be harder to breathe. It'll be annoying. But you're not going to die. There's just too much space for the osmosis, for the carbon dioxide to move. The government kills people to help them, whoever them is. That's what the government's for, right?
All of these things do matter. So I think you cannot justify a drug based on country to country comparison. What you need to do is pooled or randomized controlled trials. They've done many, and they are stone cold negative. So on early treatment, he's wrong. One of the arguments he makes is that if there's any drug that's effective, then they wouldn't have had EUA authority to approve the COVID-19 vaccine. And ergo, that's why they didn't want to declare these two drugs effective.
Makes sense to me. But it is true that the, as far as I understand, this is why Tim Pool wasn't allowing Lance from Surfs TV to use the meta-analyses only. Meta-analyses are good for understanding large sets of data, but you also have to understand the studies themselves. You can't just take the meta-analysis and take the conclusion and be like, okay, well, that's what it says, because there's a lot packed into that. It's like think of the largest, most dense book you've ever heard of. If somebody were to summarize that book, like, you could understand the summary, but there's a lot that's not in the summary because it's a summary. There's more stuff there. And so what I understand is that the individual trials didn't have, didn't support that, that these, hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin were all that helpful, but the meta-analyses were able to kind of twist it to make it seem like it was better than it really was. So I don't really know. Oh, it says doctors wear them all the time too, and they are chopping kids' parts off now. Well, I mean, but that I'm not going to put that on doctors, like, in general. Number one, because my dad's a doctor. Number two, because it's not doctors in general. Any group that you have, you're going to have psychos and idiots and losers and morons. So, there's teachers who are bad. There's doctors who are bad. There are athletes who are bad. There are YouTubers who are bad. There are everything who are bad. So that's not that's not a strong argument. Yeah, I mean, yeah, and they also did say cigarettes were good for you at one time, but that's a good example because we knew that wasn't the case, and there was a lot of lobbying from the tobacco companies. But eventually, and it was during my my adolescence, when I was in high school, everybody smoked, and by the time I got to college, the number of people who smoked was visibly and obviously going down. And by the time I was out of college, kids in high school, nobody smoked. Obviously, there was, vaping by then. But the lies of how cigarettes could be good for you, between the obvious correlation between, things like emphysema and lung cancer and stuff like that, and then new information that was valid, now we don't think that anymore. So it's not an issue for doctors to only have the well, it's only worse for me because I was never a cigarette smoker. Well, I was in college, but only that's a whole other story. But no, it's not. It depends on what you're vaping. As long as you're only having propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin, then you're good. But what was I saying about this? Yeah, that just it's a matter of time before all of these things that we're seeing that are being pushed by the establishment, the elites, whatever, before people wise up. And it could take a while, but eventually it's going to happen.
The problem I have with that is that, but the summer of 2020, we did know steroids were effective in this slice of severe COVID-19 from the recovery study, and yet they still had the EUA. So I'm not entirely sold. Is this even true that a drug precludes an EUA? Because it certainly didn't. We had an effective drug.
I don't think it would have mattered either way. Like, they wanted they wanted to push out the vax, and with your brother. Like, if they had they wanted to push out this vaccine, they knew exactly what they were doing. So I don't think any study of hydroxychloroquine or anything else would have changed what they did. Opus said, like RFK said, the sun would still be revolving around the earth if we trust the science. Yep. The only way science works is if you question it. He says, would it help if they would stop. It would help if they stop changing their minds. How many times has coffee and eggs been good or bad? So again, the issue isn't that they're changing their minds. You absolutely should change your mind in the face of new evidence. The problem is that these institutions have been infiltrated by the political lobbies, and so depending on how much money the coffee lobby and the dairy lobby and the egg lobby is paying, then remember the food pyramid. Some of you might be too young for that. Let's see. Let's get a food pyramid. Who's too young for the food pyramid? This is literally what they use. I mean, this was hanging up in hold on. This was hanging up in every cafeteria that I ever right? Is this what yeah, let's use this one. Why are they all so goddamn small? But down here was eat the most grains and cereals. Eat more fruits and vegetables. Eat moderately. Meat, poultry, fish, eggs, dry beans, and then on the other side, and dairy products. And so now we know that the eat moderately, which was only topped or bottomed, I guess, by fats, oils, and sweets. This should be these three should be at the bottom. And then this should be right above those. And then the dairy and the fat, well, not even, because fat is good too. It's and that's why, that's why it changes so often, because it's not just that there is changing information. It's that there's changing financial interests as well. That is the issue. Nah, fuck Bill. Fuck him. Fuck him. Once he said that gender is on a spectrum and we can never know, and nope, canceled in my mind. Canceled. Oprah said, I'm from the Mr. Wizard generation. Not familiar. Please enlighten me. He says, no doubt, all you can do is aggregate information and try to coalesce it. Bill Nye doesn't call the candle the Mr. Wizard. I don't know. Who is Mr. Wizard? Ketchup, the almighty vegetable. Yeah, that's 60% gluten.
What?
What you talking about, Willis?
Didn't preclude EUA. The final thing is he's critical of remdesivir. I think that's accurate. I have it in my post. The pooled meta-analysis of randomized trials of remdesivir is also negative. Let's turn to regulatory capture. RFK Jr. is worried that our regulatory agencies do the work of the industry that they're supposed to regulate. And on this issue, I think he actually has a pretty good point. That the FDA reviewers, their primary place they go to work after the FDA is, in fact, the pharmaceutical industry. Rochelle Walensky just stepped down from CDC. We'll see where she goes. Scott Gottlieb used to be FDA commissioner. Now he's on the board of directors of Pfizer, and he's also talking about how important Pfizer products are. Why is this a problem? When you're in government and you rubber stamp a perpetual booster campaign in men who are 20 years old who've had COVID, that's a dubious decision. It's very likely they're going to have myocarditis. The upside of that additional dose, now that they've had COVID and they've had a few doses, that's going to be small. In fact, it's poorly quantified because we actually don't have good randomized control trials in that population. And so the person making that decision is somebody who is shaping their views based on lower quality evidence. That person later goes to work for the company that profited handsomely from that decision. It looks like corruption, and it looks very bad. I think RFK Jr. has a point there. That is, in fact, a sign or symptom.
I'm not surprised, motherfuckers.
And people working there know that that's where you're going to go to work later. And so while they're working there, they may
there's
have
incentive.
Behavior. They may not
Right.
be a tough regulator. That's something I've been worried about for many years.
So here's what are we gonna do? You guys know the party never ends. Oh, really quick, let's get this from Zippy. So that food pyramid may work if everyone is working out and doing consistent manual labor.
Haram!
Oh, wait, I meant to. If you're not burning calories, the table is poison. Yes, exactly. So here's what we're gonna do. Because you guys are all Discord members, I've been wanting to try out this the after party stage channel. So we're gonna stop here and head over to Discord, and we're not going to the video chat. We're going into the after show. So I'm gonna finish this video in there. If you and I'll explain how it works. So meet me over there. I want to thank you guys so much for hanging out. And I think we got a decent picture of who RFK is, and that he's not an automatic enemy like a Biden or a Hillary. But there's definitely more, more information that we need. We definitely need to, pay attention to what is going to be happening between now and Election Day. Even if you never, ever, ever would vote Democrat, it still is important to understand what the playing field looks like. And that's exactly why I wanted to go into this blind. I kind of wish the part of the problem episode was a little bit more spicy, but it's not always going to be that way. This is, as much as, thank you, Melty, as much as this absolutely is a party. It's a party to learn and to have fun. And I think, I try to make it fun, and we're heading over to the after party. We can get really fun, but it is very important that we understand the topics that we're talking about. So they're not all going to be crazy drama and red pill this and that, but definitely we are always going to have a good time, and you guys definitely make it easy for that to be the case. I want to thank you guys so much for being here. Big shout out to Indie Film for helping out, and for Lars and Rune for sponsoring the stream. Thank you so much. There we go. The rest of you guys, I am very, very, very glad that you were here. And you guys had a lot of good stuff, especially, these are one of the streams where I need people like you guys, because I'm not going in very informed on what I'm talking about. I'm kind of just going in and reacting to what I see. So the fact that you guys were able to bring a lot to this conversation, really, really, really appreciate it. Thank you again. And I know you guys I'm going to see in just a second, but to the replay gang, let me know in the comments what you thought. And if you're not in the Discord, then you're just going to have to miss the rest of the party. So make sure you join. It is free. It's free. Did I mention it's free? It's free. So come on over. Thank you so much. Once again, I really do appreciate you. This has been Morty, and I have been your host, Lutch, aka the Indian Jesus, here to resurrect the second coming of common sense. Until next time, guys, we are out of here. Peace.